So what do you want here? Appendectomy, lipo, or the sampler? That's very popular.
I want you to stick this crayon into my brain.
No problem. The old Crayola oblongata.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans, brought to you by ThatShelf.com. Every episode, we talk about a movie parodied on The Simpsons. Maybe it was The Simpsons that introduced us to the film, or maybe when we finally saw it, we realized, hey, that's where that Simpson joke came from. Regardless, each week we picked one that one of us hasn't seen or hasn't seen in a while, watch it, and come together to discuss. I'm your host, Adam Scholes, and joining me as always is the... Great. This is great. Is the Algernon to my Charly. Don't know how I feel about that. My co-host, Nate Storing. How are you today, my friend?
I'm a super intelligent mouse, I guess, a rat. So, I don't think either of us is winning in that equation.
Yeah, I guess so. It's, you're right. Yeah, fair enough.
I'm doing well, though. I'm feeling
good.
refreshed.
You're doing better than Algernon is doing at the end of this story, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
good.
Exactly.
Good. That's great. Well, this week we watched Ralph Nelson's Charly from 1968, a movie which very much does not exist, and believe me, we're going to get into that, which you may or may not remember from such Simpsons episodes as Season 12's Homer, spelled H-O-M backwards R. Well, let's just get into the Simpson episode because I think that's where I actually have something nice to say. So, Homer, Season 12, Episode 9, directed by Mike B. Anderson, written by the great Algernon, original air date January 7th, 2001, 33 years after the release of this movie. And this is the episode where Homer temporarily regains his intelligence after having a crayon removed from his brain and deepens his relationship with Lisa. And I will say, I'm realizing now, Nate, because we've covered a couple of Season 12 episodes this season. Yeah. And Season 12 is clearly in that era where I actually remember watching the show as it was airing, because I do remember watching this episode and I do remember quoting this episode, and it's interesting. We're sort of like in this sweet spot where, I don't remember it from the reruns. I remember it from its original air date, which is it's just kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find these really interesting because, now that I understand a little bit more about the history of The Simpsons, it's like, this is Algernon returning to the show after The Critic, right? Mm-hmm. And these episodes are, so clearly Algernon, right? Mm-hmm. Because, this is got to be in the top 20 most, movie reference stuffed episodes in the show, right? At least in the early years. And that's so his MO, and as are these sort of episode long parodies of movies that are it's not a strict parody, but it is inspired by Charly.
Yeah. Well, and it's also too, I would say we're in that period where, again, the sort of the Act 1 plot has basically nothing to do with the rest of the story, which I feel really sort of comes into play in that sort of Season 10 onwards. And so every time I watch one of these and it starts, I'm sort of like, wait, where is this going again? And then by the end, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I totally understand. I remember this episode, or I understand why we're covering this episode. But I always have that sort of brief moment where I'm like, I really have no idea where this is going.
Yes. The Animation Festival is not a parody of Charly.
No. It's and it has, again, it really has nothing to do with the rest of the plot in any way, shape, or form.
They just needed to get Homer in debt somehow.
Yeah,
so that he had to go to the medical testing facility or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, well, Nate, talk us through the reference here. What is the reference? Why did they reference this? Yeah, and well, I guess actually my biggest question is this a confirmed they were doing Charly, or is this one of we're making the assumption they're doing Charly?
Well, so this is, I think, confirmed that they're doing Charly, and the biggest tip-off is that the title is definitely a parody of the misspelled title of this movie, which is spelled, Charly, and it's styled with a backwards R or some backwards letter. And so, that is a direct reference to this movie. And it's we'll get into it, but it's a little bit fuzzy because the movie is also based on a short story called Flowers for Algernon, which was also expanded into a novel
Right.
But the movie is not an adaptation of the novel. It's an adaptation of the short story.
Right.
So
yes,
there's
and it
these
was
sort of-
also previously made as like an episode of a TV series, like one of those,
like a TV movie, basically.
Yeah, teleplay. This was a big thing in the like 60s where they would basically adapt stories as what they called teleplays because they were 1 hour movies essentially. So they weren't like feature length. They were essentially 1 hour plays that they then filmed.
Yeah.
And this was adapted as one of those.
Exactly. So it's like, so in other words, there's lots of different versions of this source material, but it's definitely inspired by Flowers for Algernon / Charly, I think.
Gotcha.
It's probably safe to say. So other than the title, like the kind of general conceit of the episode, which is, you know, Homer has a surgical procedure to like become intelligent, is the plot of Charly.
Yes.
But also, like, there are other nods throughout. So, for example, when he's at the medical testing facility and he's doing one of the tests and there's a rat that's beating him at the test.
Damn it!
Man, is he dumb.
That's from this movie as well.
Yes.
Like, you know, the whole Algernon is the name of the rat.
Right.
So, you know, a lot of the movie is about the relationship between Charly and Algernon. You also have a moment where Lisa and Homer are having a conversation because now that he's super intelligent, he's like surprised that life isn't better, right? And Lisa tells him,
Dad, as intelligence goes up, happiness often goes down. In fact, I made a graph. I make a lot of graphs.
and that's almost exactly the same thing that Charly sort of comes to in this movie as well. There's a line where he even kind of formulates it pretty similarly, but that sort of surprise of like, oh, you know, I thought being intelligent would make life easier, but actually it kind of is more than they bargained for.
Right.
Is sort of a similar thing. This one's a little bit more arguable, but there is a scene where Homer is invited to give a lecture about putting things up your nose.
Specifically, the third entry in a series about not putting things up your nose, which is a great Simpsons joke.
Yes. And that's kind of similar to the climax of this movie, which is sort of I don't know what you call it, a scientific convention where Charly is invited to kind of answer questions from the audience.
Right.
That setup's kind of similar. And then finally, Homer pissing off his coworkers by kind of being too good at his job feels quite similar to a beat in this movie as well.
Yeah.
Now, while the plant is brought up to code, there will be massive layoffs. That is to say, total layoffs. Toodles.
Way to put us out of work, genius.
So there's lots of like nods throughout, but it's really the overall premise that I think is the parody.
I mean, I guess we don't always touch on this because sometimes it's a little bit more obvious than others. But I guess my question then is, and maybe I'm tipping my hand a little bit here, but considering how this movie absolutely does not exist, despite winning Academy Awards, why on earth do you think they chose to parody it? I mean, to me, it seems like maybe it's, again, to your point, it's maybe more that they're parodying this short story, which from what little research I did, it seems like this short story is pretty popular in like middle school curriculums. Like we never read it, obviously, or I never read it. I don't know if you did, but I think it's like a little bit more popular in American sort of middle school educational curriculums. So my guess is that maybe there's more knowledge of the short and not necessarily the film, and maybe that's why they're riffing on it. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have any like thoughts on that? Because it doesn't seem like an obvious choice of parody material necessarily,
right,
when you consider that the movie is not a classic.
Yeah, so I would say there's two angles on this. One is definitely what you just said, which is that it is, the book is still quite popular in school. Like, people our age from the US often read it in school, so they'd be familiar with the short story and would probably recognize the beats of it as Flowers for Algernon, right?
Right.
But then the other sort of angle on it is, sometimes it's just homage French for stealing, right?
Yeah,
French
fair.
for theft is like, it's a good story for Homer. I think is actually what it boils down to. Is it's like an interesting way to shake up the formula for Homer and his relationship with Lisa, and like there's like obvious character hooks for this plot. I think that's probably the main reason. It's not so much like they're looking for people to recognize Charly or even Flowers for Algernon, but really like it's a good premise for a Simpsons story. That's my guess.
Yeah, well, and I think this is one of your talking points later, but also too, this is very much of that era where people were complaining about how dumb Homer got.
Right.
And so I feel like this is sort of a way of them maybe addressing that or trying to course correct that, at least if only for an episode. But like, I do remember that was in the conversation of like Homer's lack of intelligence had become cartoonish.
Right.
And this does feel like maybe it's a meta commentary on that.
Right, because, I mean, you know, the main character of this movie has an intellectual disability. So it's like, they're basically saying, like, Homer is so dumb that it could be diagnosed medically. Right. But he's not. He doesn't have a disability. He is just a very dumb character.
Yeah.
But, like, that was the criticism at the time, was that it's like, he's so, like, you know... They got to the point where the writers were like, the one rule is that Homer can't be so dumb that he forgets his own name. Like, which is like, that was the bar at this point.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think it was in the conversation, and this definitely feels like a play on it.
Yeah, because I mean, I think the criticism is somewhat valid in the sense that those early seasons, he's more buffoonish than he is stupid.
Yes.
Whereas he gets to the point where it just like, you sort of go, how does this man function?
Yeah. And
so
and I think too, like, you know, for me, I think it's more the balance of the character where it's like, he was always pretty dumb. And there are some examples like early on that are like shockingly dumb, but like, it's more that like in these later seasons in our time frame, he starts to become a jerk. Like he's unlikable. And that's kind of the thing that shifts for me is like Homer's always dumb, but then he's kind of endearing and caring. And like he tries to be a good father and tries to be a good husband. He's just really bad at it and very dumb and makes bad decisions. Right. And that's the part that kind of balances out a little bit. And they're able in the stories, episode to episode, they're able to kind of like bring it back around where you're like, I guess I forgive him. Whereas like, some of the episodes in this like later period, it's like he does things that are kind of unforgivable or like just like really awful, and they don't kind of come back around to that like caring moment. Well, I'm being an exception, actually.
Yeah,
you get the letter at the end where
totally.
You know, he kind of makes the connection to Lisa, which feels very much like an Algernon touch. You know, the season 3-4 sort of touch.
Yeah, I'm kind of reminded of I can't remember which Christmas episode it is, but the one where he basically like he just buys gifts for himself and like, and again, it's just like he's a jerk, right? So yeah, I think you're right. I think that's maybe the sort of tipping point. Okay, well, let's talk about the other references because as you said, this is, you know, being an Algernon episode, this is a reference heavy episode, and I think I even caught a couple that you overlooked as well. So more mystery references, I would say. But yeah, so let's unpack these a little bit.
Okay, so the Animation Festival is packed with references to both television and movies. We're just going to talk about the movie ones, so there may be some that you saw that are more TV, but here are some of the things that are going on at the festival. Transformers, right? They watched that sort of TV show that, you know, they identify as Japanimation at the time, a very 90s, or I guess, is this 90s or 2000s?
This is early 2000s. So,
early 2000s sort of term, which we'd now call anime. But yeah, so there's a parody that's kind of a mashup of a bunch of different things, but they call it Transformazoids. So I feel like that's the one that's like clearly identified. The villain's also called Meganaught, so you know, kind of Megatron.
Which I want to jump in here because this was one thing I noticed. It was like I was really shocked at how much this doesn't feel like I know it's meant to be a parody of anime, but it doesn't look or feel like anime at all. And I think at the time you could get away with that because anime was very much this, at least North America was probably more of like an underground subculture. Like you had dedicated fans and it hadn't sort of permeated into the mainstream the way it has now. But like, because I'm not even an anime fan, but watching this now, I'm like, man, this looks nothing like anime.
No.
Like it's way too Like, there's too much going on. It's too well animated. Like, and I don't mean that disparagingly, but like that's the whole thing with anime is like they will keep things simple and like you'll have beautifully rendered backgrounds, but then you'll have a close up where only the lips are moving and stuff like that. Whereas this feels too Simpsons-y, and I just think that's. I think it's something of the era because a couple years later they would have to. They would have adjusted and made it look and feel more like anime.
Right, totally. And yeah, it's like one of those things where like anime has this balance of, you know, the stuff in between the exciting moments is very, very simple. And then they'll have these moments that are incredibly well animated, but they're repeated episode to episode, right?
Yeah,
at least in that era, right? And so it's like that's sort of the thing that I think they overlook is like the transformation that happens should be like a scene that feels like a separate thing that's kind of dropped in.
Yeah,
instead of something that happens in the scene that they're showing on the TV.
Yeah.
It's stuff like little details like that I agree. It doesn't totally feel like anime. So, okay, continuing on. So there's a parody of From Here to Eternity.
Yeah.
With Itchy and Scratchy kissing each other on a beach.
Yeah.
Which Homer does not like.
Yeah, was that cat making out with that mouse?
Wizard of Oz. Lisa asks an animation festival speaker whether his character is a ripoff of the Cowardly Lion, among many other characters.
And then this was something I noticed was that when Mr. Burns gets into his golf cart, there's a logo on the front that kind of looks like the Wicked Witch riding her broomstick.
Oh, well spotted.
Yeah, I don't know. I like it could just be a weird. Maybe I'm reading into it, but like it's too specific to be not specific. You know what I mean? Like it clearly looks like something, and I don't think it's a parody of a golf company or something.
Right.
So. But yeah,
and they love making the Mr. Burns Wicked Witch of the West connection. So that kind of makes sense. All right, The Godfather, when Homer is in the motion capture suit, he says, "I'll make you an offer you can't refuse." That's obvious. There's several sort of parodies right in that moment when he's in the suit. So one of the other ones that I didn't spot, found this online, is when he's doing the sort of floppy arm dance. That is apparently from Young Frankenstein.
Oh.
I'm not sure exactly when. It might be the stage scene in Young Frankenstein, right? Which would make sense because it's kind of set up the same. But apparently that is from that movie.
Interesting.
There's also just lots of memorabilia, right, at the festival. So there's a Star Trek booth, a Trek Tunes booth. There's a Yellow Submarine poster, My Neighbor Totoro, the Iron Giant, of course, the great Brad Bird, making that Simpsons connection there. And then Gertie the Dinosaur, which is kind of a deep cut, but a very old animation as well.
There's also a Poochie booth, which I think is so stupid, but a nice little detail.
Yes, apparently he has a cult following even after cancellation.
Yeah, exactly.
There's like 2 episodes of Itchy and Scratchy or whatever. Okay, so moving on from the animation festival, there's a really fun mashup reference when Homer goes to like what is it called again? IPO Fridays.
Yeah.
And he's looking to invest in some stocks where he's imagining how investing works. And it's a mashup between the Gold Diggers of 1933 and King Kong. Yeah. So the Gold Diggers of 1933, it's actually referenced on the show a lot. It's referenced in cartoons in general a lot. Yeah. Because the song, We're in the Money, da 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 da, that's from this musical film of 1933. So that happens, but actually the stage part that's in his imagination of the women wearing the dollar signs on their head and everything, that's actually from the movie. This is the only time they visually reference that movie.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting.
But then, of course, the curtains draw back and King Kong is there and he's also wearing like a top hat and grabbing money. That's a great moment. I love that one. Okay, we get one of many references to The Lost Weekend.
Yes. This is the thing that I posed to you like about a year ago, and I sent you a text being like, whenever they do that thing where Homer's walking and there's a bunch of signs in the background, like that's clearly from something. What is that from? And that's what this is from.
It's from The Lost Weekend, and I think this is the commentary where they actually confirm that that's where they get it.
Okay. Interesting.
But rewatching it, one thing I noticed that I hadn't ever noticed before is that the music is definitely not from The Lost Weekend.
Right. Okay.
And I think it sounds more like Chinatown to me. It's kind of like a generic,
noir-y
film noir sort of thing. But like, sometimes when we try to do something like that's like a generic genre thing, you're actually referencing a very, very specific thing. Because it's like Chinatown is like synonymous with noir, but actually like that score is really distinctive. The like, sort of solo trumpet sound, all of that. And that's what it sounds like to me, but hard to say for sure. Okay, you get another like full film parody of, I think it's basically Runaway Bride is kind of what it's riffing off of, just based on who's in it and what the sort of setup of the movie is. But it's like, it's one of those ones where it's like, they're riffing on the title of what it is, but like what they're actually showing is nothing like what the movie actually is at all. It's not a parody of a specific scene, but that's pretty funny. And the movie is called Love is Nice. You got a Flintstones reference.
Yes.
Osmodiar, an invisible green alien, appears to Bart and then later to Homer in this episode. And on film, this character does actually appear in the Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas.
Yeah.
So
insane.
Yes. We'll have to watch that one sometime.
I don't think we. Oh, and actually, this is great. Do you want to know who plays the Great Gazoo in Viva Rock Vegas?
Who?
Alan Cumming.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fun.
And he also plays Mick Jagged, the Stones' English lead singer.
Perfect.
Yeah,
that movie, I'm sure,
this movie sounds
great.
So bad. Although I will say, I did actually see the original live-action Flintstones movie back when it came out, because of course I did.
Yeah, no, me too. And I remember the production design being very impressive.
Oh yeah. It's a good-looking movie. It's just not a good movie. But.
Yes, exactly. Okay, and then here's a deep cut. So at one point, Mo says he was a lot happier before he knew Dame Edna was a man. A lot happier. Apparently, that character actually originates in a movie as a side character in Barry McKenzie Holds His Own.
Okay.
So even though, of course, that character has like a long afterlife, it is originally a movie reference when you're talking about just that character in general.
Fascinating.
So, Adam, tell me about these mystery references you spotted.
Well, it's really just the one. And so there's the scene where Homer's in the mocap suit and he goes to the bathroom and he's still wearing the mocap suit and everybody sees and hears what he's doing. And there's a very similar scene in The Naked Gun where Frank Drebin is wired up to a PA system because he's like giving an address. And then he goes to the bathroom, and then everyone hears him as he's taking a leak, and it's hilarity ensues because he's like commenting on how much they're very funny, very funny movie.
Urinal cake eroding gone.
No, but I can't remember exactly what he says. But and again, I don't know that. I'm sure something else has done that before. So whether or not this is a specific reference to The Naked Gun, like that's why I say it's a mystery reference. Yeah. But watching that scene, I was immediately thinking of that scene in The Naked Gun, which if people haven't seen The Naked Gun but they like The Simpsons, you absolutely need to see those movies. They are utterly hysterical. I rewatched the first and the second one somewhat recently one night because I was like, I only had it was like 9:30 and I was like, I want to watch something, but I need to watch something that A, I've seen before, and B, that's short. And I was like, The Naked Gun movies. And they were recently restored in 4K. And I had them in my iTunes library and I threw them on. I'm like, I doubt these are going to hold up. And they absolutely do. I was just like howling with laughter. I'm
sure you're ecstatic about the new Lego sequel coming out.
I'm very intrigued by the Lego sequel.
Yep.
I have mixed feelings about the Lonely Island's work outside of the Lonely Island. But I watched the trailer, and even the first half of the trailer, I'm like, I don't know that this is what I want. But then the payoff with the OJ gag did actually have me laugh out loud. Yeah. And I was like, okay, that if it's more like that, then I'm gonna give this movie a pass. So
right.
So I'm definitely gonna see it, but yeah, with trepidation.
Right, with fingers crossed. Sure.
Yeah, very much so. Hey everyone, it's Adam from the future. I just wanted to jump in to say we recorded this episode early in the summer. It is now deep into the winter. I have now subsequently seen The Naked Gun. I just wanted to say it's sensational. It is so funny. It's one of the most enjoyable movie theater experiences I've had in I can't remember how long. It's so funny. I cannot recommend it highly enough. If you love The Simpsons, please see this movie. It is chock-a-block full of jokes. Joke a minute. Like, it's so much fun. And it would be great to bring back the studio comedy. So it's a little late to support it in theaters, but rent it, buy it, all that great stuff. I loved it. It's so good. Okay, back to the episode. Okay, what other mystery references did you catch?
So I went back and forth on this one because it does, like, looking online, I've seen this posed, but I'm not sure if I totally buy it. The 3D animation that Homer participates in, the dog, the animated dog, seems like it could be inspired a bit by Snoopy, but there's nothing that specifically ties it to the character. There's no doghouse. There's no like they could have dropped in something else that would have kind of like really pinned it to being Peanuts.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah. That feels like it, just because it's a white dog. I don't know that Snoopy gets to hold the reins of white dog, but
he doesn't have a monopoly on all white dogs with black ears.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If it had a spot on its back, then I would be more, or like a little cartoon bird, like then you go, okay, yeah, maybe. But yeah, it seems a little generic, but who knows?
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so here's one. Homer accidentally proves there's no God while like coming up with a tax scheme. It just feels so specific that like and it may not be a movie, but like, is there a short story or something about someone who like accidentally proves there's no God with math? It just sounds like it's a premise for something. So I don't know.
And certainly Flanders' reaction of like then burning it and saying, no, we can't let this get out. That feels very much like it's from something too. But
Right. And then the other thing I noticed was just there's a lot of unique music in this episode that feels like some of it could be a reference to something. So at the drug testing facility, there's a kind of... all of these are sort of similar to other things that they've done before, but there's a music cue that sort of sounds like it's probably from like a hospital TV show.
Right.
Like it's ER or something like that.
Right.
At the library, there's another theme, and it's their classic like fancy institution theme.
Right, like
it's
academia theme.
Yeah, they use it for universities a lot, like in the Homer Goes to College episode. That might be the first time it appears. But it's got like it sounds like it's maybe like French horn and harpsichord or something like that. And like that's probably from a movie of some kind or some source, but I'm not sure exactly what. And then when Moe's about to do the surgery to make Homer dumb again, there's another sort of music cue that feels in the vein of maybe like the Twilight Zone or something like that. It's that kind of sci-fi thrillery sort of sound to it. But again, not sure if that's a reference to something in particular. I feel like one thing I've been noticing on my second rewatch for this show is just like the music kind of evolves across the seasons. So it's like some things that start out as like a very distinctive parody evolve into like a general go-to thing that they use that feels less like the original. So like I feel like The Natural kind of has this trajectory where it's like it starts out as a very clear reference to The Natural, but then I feel like in later seasons you hear bits and pieces of it come back, but it sounds a little bit less like the original song and a little bit more like its own thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I kind of feel like that might be going on a little bit with some of these too, where they're starting to evolve into their own, not even a sound-alike, but their own Simpsons version of that idea.
Well, is there anything else from the episode that you wanted to discuss before we unpack this movie?
Oh, God. Yeah, let's delay the inevitable a little bit here. So we got to talk about Gravy and Jobriath.
Yeah, 100%. That was one of my favorite moments in the show.
Probably the standout moment of this episode, I think.
What you making there, Gravy?
It's a pipe bomb, Jobriath, for to blow up Planned Parenthood.
I don't know, Gravy.
So, yeah, this was created by the Chiodo brothers, this like little moment of stop motion. And apparently, so they're known for making the Killer Clowns from Outer Space. They actually like directed and produced that, but have done stop motion in many other movies. So prior to this, like one that sticks in my memory is they animated Large Marge in Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure.
Okay.
Have you seen that one?
I haven't.
Okay.
Pee-wee is like a total blind spot for me, though. I started watching the Paul Rubens documentary, and I was like, I think I don't know that it's going to be my shit, but like I do feel like I need to give it a chance, so.
Yeah. Pee-wee Herman's Big Adventure is a good entry point, actually.
Okay, cool.
And it's nice because it's like totally self-contained, very goofy, but there's a famous moment in that, and when you see it, you'll know exactly what it is.
Interesting.
Okay. And they also did Team America World Police after this, and the animation in Elf. So like,
so
those are the things that stick out to me. But they've done lots and lots of stuff over their career.
Okay, interesting, cool.
They do like a perfect knockoff of Davy and Goliath with this. Yeah. With like a
which
very
is just like
touch.
I love that whole segment. I mean, first off, Jabriath is just a hilarious name, but I love the fact that like Flanders says that this is approved, and then it's horrifically violent, but like then he doesn't comment on it. Like it's just I don't really entirely get what they're trying to say here, but I just thought it was very funny.
I think it's just like a deference to the church joke. I think of like, well, as long as it's approved by the church,
exactly.
Then like because like he's gonna blow up Planned Parenthood. Like that's the joke in that scene, which is probably one of the darkest jokes on The Simpsons. Like period.
Yep.
And then he blows up his dog instead.
Yeah, exactly.
Brutal.
Yeah. So, I love that. I love that moment. Another thing I wanted to call out was speaking to the like, remember vividly this when it was airing. The Daddy, ask the man for some candy. Me and my friend Stephen from grade school would reference this all the time. Like I don't know why, but it was just something that we would always like. I think it was because we would go to like a little store at like lunch or after school to get like penny candies or whatever, and whenever we would quote that. But
penny candies, even just the idea of penny candies sounds so old-timey now, but
I know.
When we were kids it was still a thing.
Yeah, I mean it might not have been. I think it was usually they were like 2 cents or 5 cents, but we still called them penny candy. But yeah, the idea that there was still penny candy when we were children is
that you would go get a single piece of candy for a small amount of money is a very antiquated idea.
Yes, it's just nuts.
But yes, I remember you still saying that in high school for sure.
Oh, okay, well there you go. So maybe I guess it just must have been something that, and again, it fell out of my lexicon for decades, and then rewatching this, it just like and I was like, oh my gosh, yes. So
yes, there are also 2 references to people we've covered on this show, which I thought was fun. So this is the other reference to Glenn Gould on the show.
Yeah, exactly.
When Homer's listening to the radio and gets a very erudite joke on like NPR.
That sonata may not be a Glenn Gould performance, but I must say it's good as Gould.
And there's also a reference to Jerry Lewis and the fact that Professor Frink is a parody of Jerry Lewis, but Frink is accusing the voice actor of riffing on Lewis. So anyway, that was also fun and a kind of throwback to our the Nutty Professor episode.
Exactly. All right, do we want to get into this?
One more thing I need to say.
Good. You're going to continue to delay it. I appreciate that.
Nothing cracks a turtle like Leon Uris.
Yes.
Just that line and this delivery from Cletus makes me laugh out loud every time, even though it doesn't really make any sense.
I don't get the joke, but it's funny. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
It's funny because it's coming out of Cletus. All right, Nate, let's unpack this, I guess.
Yeah, I need to ask you this time because I just know your answer is going to be super salty. So, Adam, how would you sum up this movie, Charly, in a sentence?
Dreadful.
That's not a sentence. That's a word.
Yeah, no, hey, sentences can be one word. No, actually, I'm gonna because I had the movie in my like streaming application, and when I pulled it up last night to watch it, it actually has a perfect 1-sentence summary. So I'm just going to read it because it's usually the plot synopses that are in these things are a couple sentences long and of varying quality. This is literally 1 sentence and it tells you everything you need to know. And they say, an intellectually disabled man undergoes an experiment that gives him the intelligence of a genius.
I mean, that's pretty much it.
The only other thing that I would add is that gives him the intelligence of a genius and he quickly realizes that being smart isn't all it's cracked up to be or, what have you. But that is basically the plot of the movie.
Totally. Yes. Well, I did find another synopsis.
Oh, okay, great.
from a $130 Blu-ray version of this movie.
Dear God.
This is how much this movie doesn't exist. On Amazon, you can buy a Blu-ray from like Kino Lorber.
Right, of course. Of course it's put out by Kino Lorber, too.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Yes. And,
okay.
So I'll let you take it away, Adam.
All right, thank you. They freed his mind. She captured his heart. From the classic Daniel Keyes novel Flowers for Algernon comes this moving and unforgettable adaptation by director Ralph Nelson, Lilies of the Field, and screenwriter Sterling Siliphant, In the Heat of the Night. This timeless tearjerker features an Academy Award-winning leading performance by Cliff Robertson, The Devil's Brigade, and a rousing score by the legendary Ravi Shankar, Gandhi. I like that they have to call it that he did the score for Gandhi. When a mentally challenged man named Charly, Robertson, undergoes experimental brain surgery, he is miraculously freed from the prison of his own mind. As his IQ soars to genius proportions, Charlie's eyes are open to a world he has never truly seen. But when the effects of his operation inexplicably begin to fade, Charlie must find a way to halt his regression before his own mind destroys his life, his newfound romance, and the man he's become. Arthur J. Ornitz, the boys in the band, shot this classic drama co-starring Claire Bloom, The Haunting, and Dick Van Patten, Zachariah. Wow.
That's a terrible description of this movie, I think.
Yeah.
On a bunch of levels.
Not great. But neither is this movie, so I guess I can't really fault the writers at Kino Lorber.
Yeah. I mean, so I feel like this description gets at exactly one of the key problems with this is just
it sure does.
The framing of Charlie's disability is very challenging, I would say, for a modern audience.
Not good, Nate. It's not good.
Great. It's very complicated, but it's not great. And also just the fact that, like, you know, Claire Bloom's character is like just like mentioned at the very end of this, even though like the tagline at the beginning is referencing her character.
Yes.
It gets at a lot of the problems with this movie, in my opinion, but we'll get into all of it.
Oh, boy, will we. I mean, I'm going to ask, though I know the answer, what's your relationship with this movie, Nate?
I mean, absolutely nothing. This is a classic example of, like, you know, I saw it on The Simpsons first. I knew after that it was a parody of Flowers for Algernon. Right. Did not know that there was a movie called Charly, and then now here we are. But like that's my entire relationship with it. And it's like, as you said, we didn't read Flowers for Algernon in school. So it's like, it's not really, I don't think it's as much in the Canadian curriculum, and so don't have that kind of existing relationship with this story. But what about you? Any different?
No, literally had no idea this thing existed. You, when we were making our selections for this season, you're like, we're going to do Charly. And I was like, what the is Charly? And you're like, it's going to be our season. Because we always do, whenever we do these, we like to pick a couple sort of like, I don't want to call them wild cards, but movies that you go, I had no idea that this was a parody on the show, let alone that this thing even exists. So we always like to find something like that, whether it's like The Magic Christian or like Day of the Dolphin, these things where you know, like, you present them to me and I'm like, this is not, what do you mean this doesn't exist? And then it very much does exist. And then you go, oh, but there's a reason why nobody knows that this exists.
Well, but often they are super weird and they have like interesting people involved. Like a lot of the people involved in this are very like renowned.
They also tend to have been like either big successes box office wise or big successes like critically or like received really well. Like this won an Academy Award and yet like hasn't sort of withstood the test of time like a movie like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or something like that, where, you know, it becomes this instant classic as a result of the laudance or the box office that it receives. It just sort of fades into obscurity, which, like, that happens now too. Anybody remember the movie The Artist? No, of course you don't, but it won a hell of a lot of Academy Awards,
including Best Picture.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like this continues to happen, but it's just because these movies tend to be from like the 60s or 70s, they've faded into obscurity. So I think that's why it's interesting when we choose them.
And the other thing I would say is that, like, you know, a lot of the movies that are the most beloved are just the most accessible, right?
Totally.
And so it's like, that's the classic, like, It's a Wonderful Life thing where it's like, and I love It's a Wonderful Life, don't get me wrong, but like, it, in its time, was not considered a success, but then was on TV every single year, and people like reappraised it and fell in love with it. And it's like, this is the opposite story, right? Where it's like, at the time, it got a wide release, it won Oscars, but the thing is, it was an independent movie, in a sense, partially independent, and distributed by ABC Pictures, as in American Broadcasting Corporation. Yeah. And guess what? That company existed from 1965 to 1972.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And then it went away, and all the rights to those films, including Cabaret, incidentally.
Yes.
Right? Became like in this weird netherworld and bought up by various things over the years and went in and out of circulation. And so it's like, it's partly forgotten because it's just been kind of inaccessible.
Well, I mean, it costs $130 on Blu-ray, so that kind of, that tells you everything you need to know. Like, this is, and again, similarly, like, Day of the Dolphin is on an obscure, like, Blu-ray boutique label. So yeah, like, but it's just, I think it is, as much as I didn't like this movie, spoiler alert, I didn't like this movie. This movie is dog shit. It's dreadful. It's horrible. I hated every minute of it. But I'm glad that we cover these movies because they are sort of interesting movies to unpack, just because they're movies that people don't know exist. So.
Totally.
On that note, Nate, how did this movie come to exist?
Yes. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is based on a short story called Flowers for Algernon. It was written by Daniel Keyes in April of 1959 and published in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. Which brings me to my first question for you, Adam.
Yes.
Would you have considered this science fiction?
So, again, what little research I did, I was it's funny, ever since Police Academy, I've always sort of, when it's a movie that I loathe, I tend to like go into the IMDb reviews, like fan reviews. I always check Letterboxd first to be like, okay, what do people whose opinions I kind of trust, or at least like film nerd people, what do they think? Again, this is a kind of all over the place. And then it's like, okay, now I'm going to go to the normie IMDb and see
the plebes.
What do they have to say? And a bunch of people are saying like, this is my favorite science fiction story, blah, blah, blah. Like, so many people were calling it as a science fiction story. And I actually wrote that question in my notebook too. Like, is this science fiction? And I what I would say is it's science fiction in the purest sense of the term, in that it's fiction dealing with science. Right. So in the same way, a movie like Contagion or my favorite show, Regenesis, like these things that are science-based but fiction, are technically science fiction, but it's not science fiction in the way that most people use that term, which is to mean like space and aliens and fanciful stuff and outside of our reality or what science can do currently. So I personally would not classify this as a science fiction movie. I would classify this in the, well, I won't tip my hand maybe, because we're going to get into it. But no, I would not classify this as science fiction.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, when I first watched it, I had the same reaction. I'm like, this feels more like a high concept drama, right? Of like, it's primarily a drama, but it's based on a big what if, kind of in the vein of like, I mean, this is a comedy, but like Junior.
Yeah.
Where it's like, there's a science fiction element to that, but it's not really about science per se. No. It's really a character-based comedy, right? And this is kind of a similar thing. But that what if is really what the science fiction is, as you're saying. And it actually did remind me a little bit of Michael Crichton as well.
Totally,
in that sense, and that whole conversation we had around Westworld of like, it's like one, promising technology and what would be the social implications of that one promising technology. Yeah. And obviously Westworld feels a lot more like what we think of when we think of sci-fi, but some of his other writing is much more like, well, here's a good example. That horrible movie from the 90s that was based on Michael Crichton, Disclosure.
I was going to say, that's a very broad, so you're going to have to be a little more specific. But.
Fair enough, but one of the worst movies is like a Michael Crichton adaptation. Disclosure is a great example of this, where it's like, yes, there is a science fiction component of that, but it's primarily, unfortunately, a social commentary about like women in the workplace and shit.
Yeah. Well, but even Jurassic Park, like I actually think Michael Crichton's a really good way to frame this, because like Jurassic Park, similar, like I don't think of Jurassic Park as a science fiction movie, but it very clearly is. But that's not, I think of it as like an adventure movie, or
That's
like, you know what I mean? Like, would you...
I think it's definitely science fiction personally, but
if you go to you're going to Blockbuster back in the day,
right?
It's not in the science fiction section. It's going to be in the action section, or maybe even like the family section.
That's true. I mean, I think it is more in the vein of classic monster movies, which again kind of blur the line. It's like, is King Kong fantasy or science fiction?
No, but that's my point. Is like I think it's. Again, this is where that term science fiction is so interesting, because like it really has a broad meaning, but we've sort of condensed it into one very specific sort of subgenre of science fiction.
Right.
And that's what people associate with it. So
yeah, it is the what if that involves technology, I think, that really puts it in that world. But it is interesting because Keyes, prior to writing this, actually did write for Marvel and for EC Comics. So he actually did have like a pretty firm footing in that world of like genre, basically. Right. But this story was inspired by his own personal experiences to a certain extent, of like basically going off to college and then, you know, coming back home and spending time with his parents and feeling like there was now a division between them because of like his experiences through education. But yeah, he kind of imagined the story as a tragedy, which makes a lot of sense. And first developed it as a short story, which is, again, what the film is based on. They did not have the rights to the novel, and the novel plays out differently than the movie. So, like...
Interesting, okay.
My guess is that some of the elaborations in the movie are kind of filling in blanks from the short story, and they fill them in differently than the novelization did.
Right, okay, interesting.
So, meanwhile, while this is all going on with Keyes, you have this actor, Cliff Robertson, right, who's the lead of this movie.
Who we should say is perhaps best known to our generation as Uncle Ben. He's the original Uncle Ben in, because I'm watching it, I'm like, why do I recognize this guy? And then I pull up IMDb and I was like, that's why I recognize this guy.
Yes, Uncle Ben in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, and and he's great in those, right?
Yeah, I think he's, you know, probably our best Uncle Ben. As much as I love my guy Marty, he's still probably a better Uncle Ben.
I would agree with that. So anyway, that's what he's best known for. But back in this period, he was a TV and stage guy, and also some movies, right? Okay. And he had this experience where he would play a lead role in these teleplays that you were talking about, right? And then when it was adapted to the big screen, he'd lose the lead role.
Interesting.
So, a classic example of this is Days of Wine and Roses. He played the lead role in the TV version of it, and then Jack Lemmon plays the lead role in the movie version. Right?
Okay.
And so he's like, I'm not going to do that anymore. And he ends up playing an Emmy Award-winning lead role in the TV version of Flowers for Algernon, which was called The Two Worlds of Charly Gordon on the U.S. Steel Hour in 1961, a thing that just firmly does not exist anymore.
And maybe rightfully so, but, you know.
It was always a little weird that it'd be like, you know, sponsored by a soap brand or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Hence soap operas, I guess. So anyway, he bought the film rights to this short story after getting that lead role, so that he could like confirm that he would take the lead role in the film.
Interesting.
So pretty smart career move on his part.
Yeah, totally.
So kind of unsurprisingly, they struggled to pull together funding for this. And it was mostly because, or you know, it's speculated that it's because the main character has a mental disability. And,
right.
So, you know, producers, studios are looking at this and being like, this isn't commercially viable. So Robertson decides that he's going to take a token salary of $25,000, but he owns 50% of the picture.
Wow.
But in order to actually like get it made, he actually gives 25% of that to Ralph Nelson, who comes on to direct and produce the movie.
Right. Okay.
So that's kind of how this thing actually gets made.
Okay. Who, as quickly as you can, who is Ralph Nelson? Because, like, again, when you watch these old movies, especially the ones that are covered on The Simpsons, they tend to be by filmmakers that you've, you know, heard of. Francis Ford Coppola, Milos Forman, like, guys who went on to have very successful, long careers. Never heard of this guy before.
Right. Yeah, so Ralph Nelson. So I think he's sort of a bit of a victim of he was like, he specialized in a certain kind of movie that fell out of fashion as being kind of heavy-handed.
Okay.
Right? So
oh, wow. Shocking.
Right. So like, think about them as like the Crash of their era.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, we're going to make an issue picture about like a specific social issue. And he made a lot of these.
Okay.
But by this time, like, he was pretty recognized in TV and film. He'd made films that had won a couple Oscars, including Lilies of the Field, which won Sidney Poitier his first Best Actor Oscar. He also made Father Goose, a movie that was referenced on The Simpsons.
Yep.
So like, he was kind of well known for that, but he made like a bunch of other sort of social issue pictures, and this very much fits within his general MO of like the types of things he was making around this period. But it's like, those kind of fell out of fashion, right? Because they just felt too on the nose. And like, the other thing that's happening at the same time is like Easy Rider, or is like, you know, this is like pre-New Hollywood.
Yeah, it's the start of New Hollywood, really. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But it's like, it's kind of in a different vein than New Hollywood. It's not as edgy. Like, so I think it's important to know that Cliff Robertson, when he makes this movie, is 45 years old.
Right.
Right. So he's 45 in 1968. So he's not one of the hippies that's out there during the Summer of Love. Right. He's of a previous generation. And so this movie kind of reflects that.
It sure does, especially one specific sequence.
Right. So it's like, he's on the progressive side of filmmaking at the time compared to like, you know, the historical epics, right? Or the musicals and things like that that were being made at this time. This is on the progressive side of that, but it's also ends up being out of touch within like a decade because of New Hollywood, because this is not really New Hollywood.
Right.
So the script started out as an adaptation by Keyes himself, but it wasn't really working, and so he gives it to William Goldman and then to Sterling Siliphant.
Yeah, this is crazy to me that like William Goldman took a crack at this and they were like, no. And so gotta say, okay, one of the greatest screenwriters of his generation, he couldn't crack it, so we'll give it to this other guy, which again, never heard of Sterling Siliphant.
No, but, for sure. And they make some choices, which we'll get into, that I think are absolutely abhorrent. But yeah, it's quite an adaptation. Let's just leave it at that for now. There's very little information about the production itself, other than the fact that it was like a 3-month shoot. And they did a lot of on-location shooting in Boston, mostly the exteriors, and then interiors in Los Angeles, but also like some on-location stuff.
Interesting.
Okay, performance. So early reviews were quite negative.
Shocker!
Yes. But I you know, part of the story, I think, is, you know, much like the Fantastic Four, which we talked about in the summer, a lot of the promo for this was really driven by the actor. Cliff Robertson was like kind of relentless and was just pushing this out there and trying to get it out there. And eventually it kind of worked and gained traction. And so it ends up at the Golden Globes. The film was nominated for Best Screenplay and Best Motion Picture Drama.
Okay.
And then Robertson wins the Academy Award for Best Actor.
Now, sorry, just sort of jumping back, I have to imagine that the pushback from the critical community and the public at large, like, obviously watching this now, we have a very different relationship with this sort of what is on screen and the portrayal, and there are issues that I take with the film as a result of that.
Yes.
But I have to imagine that those are not the issues that people are taking with it at the time. Like, what I'm getting at is that I'm sure the fact that this is a movie about an intellectually disabled person is what people were taking issue with, but for different reasons than we're taking issue with it today.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, certainly their perspective on like what that would have meant at the time is very, very different. I actually think a lot of it was the filmmaking. And,
okay.
And it's like, it's one of those things where it's hard to say where people fell off, right?
Right.
This is something we talk about on the show all the time, that it's like, usually if people are noticing something that they don't like, it's because they've already fallen off the movie, right? And so
I fell off about minute 2, so
right, and so it's hard to say like what exactly it was that was making people feel like they didn't like it. But like by the time they get to the middle of the movie, where there's a lot of formal experimentation, let's say, they were like, "What the hell is this?" And so that I feel like is where the anger is focused.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that that's actually what is going on, because there's a lot of challenging stuff in this. Like even at the time, I feel like it would have been very challenging to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so he wins the Oscar, and I guess at the time, they say this on the commentary, the Oscars were very uncool at this moment. So like from 1967 to 1972, like people just wouldn't show up.
Right.
Like you would just have actors would win and not be present because it was just uncool. Right. It's like, again, this is like, Summer of Love. There's a lot of change happening right in this moment. And eventually it's the fight between Cabaret and The Godfather in 73 that kind of brings people back to the Oscars as being like interesting. But he's like just gliding through at this moment when like everyone's like, I don't know, like what is Hollywood about? Like, again, it's kind of that gap between, the fall of the studio system and new Hollywood. Like that's right where we are.
Looking at what wins that year, so just for some perspective, Oliver wins Best Picture and Best Directing. A movie that I love Oliver. I think Oliver was the first musical I was ever in. That movie is not good.
Right.
And then you've got like Rosemary's Baby was sort of like I guess you could call that kind of like one of the underground indie sort of interesting films, along with actually 2001 is also of that year. But they don't. Rosemary's Baby doesn't win Best Picture or Best Directing or anything. It wins like Best Supporting Actress, I think is the only thing it gets for. And then other things in here is like The Producers by Mel Brooks, which feels like a weird outlier considering everything else. But like The Lion in Winter, The Subject Was Roses.
Yes. The Subject Was Roses. That sounds like a fake Simpsons title.
Sure does. So it's just like it's an interesting year.
But this is the thing. That's what the Oscars were like. Like throughout the 60s.
Yeah, totally. And so it makes sense
the early 70s.
It makes sense that people are not keyed into these things.
Because they're basically like all the interesting stuff that's getting made is not getting recognized.
Yeah. Which I mean that is when the Oscars sort of goes again cyclical, right? Like we've gone through those periods too where it's like the real sort of interesting work is being overlooked in favor of the artist.
Right, exactly. And so it's like we're in that moment when this wins, right?
Yeah, totally.
And this movie is kind of more on the side of like experimental indie thing, but as we will discuss, the formula of like this actor's portrayal of a person with a disability, I think he sets the mold for a formula that gets reused at the Oscars year after year after year.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the budget for this movie is about 1.3 to 1.5 million. It makes 8.5 million at the box office.
Return on investment.
It's actually not bad. As I mentioned, like this movie got a lot of promotion as an educational tool. Like that was like right around this period, that was like one of the big pushes was like, you should be teaching this in school, the movie and the book.
Right,
and that has lasted since like up to the childhood, at least, of like our contemporaries.
Right. Interesting.
So that is how it's like probably most remembered in the US.
God, I cannot imagine watching this. Like maybe in the 90s I could see this still being screened, but like post 2000, like there's no way they're showing children this movie anymore.
No.
I mean, A, they would just, the attention span wouldn't be there, and B, like we're gonna get into it, but I just think like the portrayal here is so misguided, and as much as I hate the genre, I think there are probably other better examples you could use that are still problematic, but like feel a little more usable.
Well, and there is also just like a moment in the middle of this movie.
Well, there's that too, yeah.
That
God.
So abhorrent and like inappropriate for like a young audience.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine watching this.
No, exactly.
It'd be much better to read the book, which does not have that moment.
No, shocker.
Yeah. So one other thing on the performance side of things, which is really hard to fathom, a sequel titled Charly 2 and directed by Cliff Robertson was shot in Boston. in the fall of 1980, but it was never released.
Okay, there we go.
Supposedly,
Wow.
in a DVD commentary for The Twilight Zone in 2006, Robertson was still gunning to complete the sequel to this movie. But Robertson died in 2011, and it was never released. It never happened.
Wow. That's right up there with like The Day the Clown Cried as the most most misguided actor-forward film adaptation. Wow.
I mean, again, this movie does not beg for a sequel. It like deeply undercuts the entire premise of the movie.
How could you make it? Like it just, literally plot wise, like
there is one way to make it, and it is that you completely undo the ending. That's the only way that you can make it.
Yeah.
So just really misguided and a bizarre thing that almost exists.
All right, let's unpack this more. Okay,
Nate. let's get into it. So I have an opening question for you, and we've kind of danced around it a little bit, but all right, this is a very particular genre that I think probably starts with this movie.
That was my sort of, I was like, this has to be the first of this kind of movie.
Yeah, and I think it probably is because he wins the Oscar that it becomes a genre, which is a non-disabled leading man, almost always, playing a disabled person in this movie, and particularly an intellectually disabled person in this genre. So, it goes on to have this like really, really long tail, obviously. I mean, you can think of the biggest ones in the genre, but like Rain Man, of course, right? What's Eating Gilbert Grape? I Am Sam. To a certain extent, also like Forrest Gump, right? It's not really explicit in that one, but that's part of it, right? And they're still making movies that have a little bit of this, I think, but it's kind of changed. So my question to you is, do you think that this particular version of the genre is dead? And if not, should it be?
Look, I have always sort of loathed this genre. Of those you've listed, Rain Man, I remember actually kind of liking that movie when I saw it, but I saw it as a teenager, so I'm not sure how well I would like. I don't know that it would hold up watching it now. And I remember I think a couple of people in my life really liked I Am Sam, so I've seen that once or twice, and I hate that movie, though I do think it or my memory is that Sean Penn gives a very good performance in that film, even if it's maybe not as, it is a misguided scenario. To your point, I think this genre has evolved into what I just classify as the Oscar bait movie. And I think with movies like Tropic Thunder, that have kind of eviscerated the idea of, a well-to-do, well-meaning leading man playing a person who is disabled, that has maybe moved away. For a while there, it moved into, let's have a cis guy play a trans person. Right. Which, thankfully, we are now moving away from that as well. Like, I think there's always going to be this misguided idea of, like, or I guess to a certain degree, like, a hetero person playing a non-hetero person, which that is certainly that's a bit more of a gray area and a little more up for debate. But still, like, we have these periods where it's like someone plays someone who is seen as an other and then is lauded for it, and then now, down the line we sort of look back on it and go, hey, maybe that was misguided and not so great, and giving them an Oscar just for that. It kind of in and of itself, because at the end of the day, that tends to be what the conversation is about. It's less about, oh, what a great actor they were, and it's more about, like, look at this transformation that they underwent. And it's very showy and very big, and, like a Dallas Buyers Club comes to mind as being maybe the last. I guess I can't remember if that came before or after The Danish Girl, but I know those two are sort of the ones that are the last big awards winners that even within like a year or two, people were going, hey, this was not cool and we should stop doing this. So my hope is that this is dead, but I'm sure there will just, it'll just move to some other thing that for a period in time will be seen as socially acceptable, and then we will look back on it and go, oof, like how did we do this?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it feels like, in the craft categories, we sometimes talk about like most editing, right? Mm-hmm. And this feels like the acting equivalent of that problem of like, it's not the best performance, it's the most performance.
It's like, it's showy. It's the thing that I do think is worth noting is that I do think it can be handled with grace or elegance or done well. The movie that comes to mind for me is The Elephant Man, which I think generally is considered, like, John Hurt gives an outstanding performance in that role. And I think part of it is that he actually imbues this character with a great deal of humanity in spite of his disability. And it also, like, it isn't showy in a way that these performances, like, you compare something to, because I think they actually came out around the same time, comparing Elephant Man to Rain Man, like, the way that those two actors take on those disabilities are so completely diametrically opposed. So I do think it can be done,
but I think, one critical difference between those is that one of them is a physical disability and one of them is an intellectual disability.
Absolutely.
And I think that, like, I again, I would never claim to be the arbiter of whether that's appropriate or not, but I do feel like it's a different type of performance because, Hurt in that movie is delivering a performance that he could give as someone who has the same ability as himself, right? And whereas, in Rain Man, it's like, well, he is putting on an affectation that's meant to mimic a disability. Yeah. And, like, that's the part that gets kind of hard. And I think, like, one of the good things that has been happening, again, in fits and starts, bits and pieces, is actually casting people who have disabilities in these movies. Like, I just watched Cha-Cha Real Smooth, a movie that on my Letterboxd, like, the reviews of this movie are just, like, everything from, like, a 1.5 star to a 5 star.
Right.
But I enjoyed it. I thought it was a really nice movie, and can understand maybe why it like rubs people the wrong way. But, like, you have to be open to the fact that it's like it is an actor-director who is casting himself in a very desirable role, right? Mm-hmm. But all that said, I think it's a really good movie, and one of the main characters has autism, and it is played by a woman who has autism. Yeah, and it's like, and it's just we're at that point, I think, now where it's like there's kind of no excuse. And I feel like there have been a couple other good examples of that recently. Like, what is it? The Peanut Butter Falcon, other movies like that, where it's like you are actually, bringing key characters in who are actors with disabilities. So I think that that's a positive change and hopefully kind of does kill this genre. But, like, now it's kind of just migrated towards, like, more biopics. Yeah. Exactly. Where it's like the same hook, though, where it's like, wow, they totally transformed themselves into this thing that we know. Yeah. Right? Or we
look, it's a great impression, and that's always been my criticism, is like, just because it's a good impression doesn't mean it's a great acting performance. Like,
but, like, so the other thing, though, about this that I wanted to kind of ground us in is, like, where was our understanding of ability and all of this now in this moment? And it kind of ties into this question of, like, is this the first version of this? But so the book and the movie come out at a time where basically, like, people with intellectual disabilities are still highly institutionalized. Yes. So, like, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? Movie comes out in 1975, but the book comes out in 1962. So it's a contemporary of this short story and book in a lot of ways. Yep. And it depicts what was sort of the norm for people living with intellectual disabilities at that time more faithfully than this movie. And so while this movie is like the obvious science fiction premise is, he gets this surgery and suddenly his IQ goes up. The fact that he is actually living independently in this movie was highly unusual at this time. And it's doing that right in the middle of this kind of growing argument in the professional community about, like, is institutionalization right or not? Right. And actually should people with intellectual disabilities be living independently or having kind of like a quote unquote normal life to the best of our abilities, right? Right. And so this is like, it's part of the science fiction premise almost of, like, he's living in this deinstitutionalized future, which does come to pass. And the interesting thing for Charlie as a character is that for him, like he has a kind of menial labor job, and at the beginning of the movie is quite lonely, right? And so it's not like a ringing endorsement of deinstitutionalization, but it is also like grappling with kind of the reality, I guess, of like what would that look like, and all of that. And of course, you know, the way that it played out in the best of ways is that like there's a community of care around people who have disabilities, and there are group homes and there are other things like that help give a little bit more support than Charlie has. But yeah, it is grappling with some of the real challenges, I think, of that model, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought that was very interesting and something I didn't really know about, but I think it's important context for this movie that it's like, it's depicting something that doesn't actually happen that often in 1968.
Well, and I guess we also have to just sort of address the key conceit of the film. Performances aside,
yeah,
the conceit of this film is that this is a person who is, you know, has a mental disability or is intellectually disabled or whatever. And I apologize if I'm using the incorrect terminology. I'm not an expert in this, so I want to try and be as respectful as possible. But the conceit is that this is a person that needs to be fixed, and that he needs to undergo surgery in order to regain or gain a level of intelligence that he otherwise doesn't have.
Well, I think that's interesting. I'm not sure if I agree with that. Because I think, like, the problem that Charlie describes, so, like, there's one of the scenes I do like is, like, when Miss Kenyon, we're jumping ahead a little, but Miss Kenyon is one of the other key characters, played by Claire Bloom in this. She tells him about this experimental surgery, right, that can help him, you know, gain IQ. And his response is basically like, yeah, well, you know, I would like to do that because I just want to connect more. Like his sort of motivation for doing it is that he wants to be closer friends with his coworkers.
Right.
And that's not what happens at all.
No.
It's the opposite of that. And so I think this movie does actually kind of challenge the idea of like, is this quote unquote fixing Charlie, or is this actually like,
I guess,
it, you know, like it's very muddy. And
but I guess at the same time, at the end of the day, like, this is coming from a writer who is presumably not of this disability, so therefore, like, I don't know, like, it's just that's what just rubs me the wrong way too throughout all of this. Is it's the classic case of, like, you know, not to say that people who don't have that lived experience can't tackle material about somebody else's lived experience. You know, like, you know, the classic thing is like, well, I've never had cancer. Does that mean I can never make a movie about a cancer patient? Like, I do think there's ways that this makes sense, but there are certain topics where it just feels like outside looking in is maybe not the best way to tackle certain topics.
Yeah.
And that's so right from the get-go, this movie and me are sort of like rubbing up against each other. And again, personal bias. I don't like this genre. I don't like this kind of movie at the best of time. I just generally find them to be emotionally manipulative. Although I again, like, reading the reviews and people saying this is a tearjerker and all that stuff, I did not find this movie emotionally moving in any way, shape, or form.
Me neither.
Other than out and out anger. So, and again, maybe that's just because it's from the 60s and we've evolved, and like a movie like I Am Sam is much more emotionally manipulative. But that all that's to say is, like, I'm definitely coming at this from the outset of like, it's just like it's pushing up against me. Now, that being said, there were moments where I was maybe a little bit moved or maybe a little bit won over by Robertson's performance. Certainly the relationship between him and his coworkers, like, they're almost caricatures of despicable humans, but like, there were times where I also was like, are they really his friends or are they just messing with him? Like, it seems unclear at times. Like, I think about the jukebox scene where it's like they're clearly playing a prank on him, but at the same time, it kind of brings him joy to make it seem like he's making the jukebox work when it breaks. So it's like, in that moment, I'm like, oh, maybe they're like just giving him a little bit of joy. But then 2 minutes later, they pull this other prank where they're like, you go wait for it to start snowing, and it's clear that they're just assholes. So it's like, I don't know, like this movie, there's so much about this movie that I have issues with. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. So let's maybe talk about these performances, because it is, look, let's call a spade. Cliff Robertson, what is your take on it? Do you think he's good in this performance? Is he heavy-handed? Like,
it's really hard to say, honestly. I think that he clearly undergoes like a big transformation in this. And I think one of the things that the Simpsons episode actually kind of points out is that there's almost no reason why he actually has to have a disability, right? It's like you could just have a character that feels socially ostracized and thinks it's because of their intelligence and then gets this surgery. And it just kind of makes it more extreme to have someone who like has an intellectual disability, but like it could be a Homer, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
And you'd still have the transformation, and you'd still have all of the issues that this is playing with would still work without the disability aspect of it. Yeah. So I think that's kind of interesting to contemplate with Cliff Robertson, because clearly his motivation for taking the role is depicting the disability, right?
Yeah.
And the sort of showiness of that to demonstrate what a good actor he is.
But the thing that I think is really interesting is that although I was fairly confident, and truth be told, like I've in my high school job, we worked with we kind of had a similar situation. One of our coworkers who was like worked in because I was a cashier, and there was I don't even know what the term would be for what his role was, but he was basically responsible for getting the carts from the parking lot. And essentially it's what you would equate to a bag boy, but he didn't actually do any bagging, but it was like, that's what the term was within the sort of grocery industry. But he was sort of like he kind of did everything like around gathering carts, mopping the floors, that sort of stuff. But he was someone who was, intellectually disabled, and so this portrayal did kind of align at times with the way that this gentleman that I worked with behaved. And so and what I'm getting at is that when I think of something like I Am Sam, where it's so showy and so like over the top with the disability, Robertson's portrayal is like it's actually kind of more subtle than I was anticipating, is I think what I'm
right.
Or I guess maybe if I compare it to like Rain Man, like where that is so over the top. Whereas this is actually
it's like a depiction of a disability, not a person with a disability. And like Charlie does feel like a person. I will say that.
And like, yes, there are certain things that feel not realistic in their portrayal, but what I was surprised by was that it was much more subtle than what these roles sort of go on to become in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, for sure.
So I have to give him credit for that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it certainly stands alongside those other performances that you think of in this genre. And, again, like trying not to like pass judgment about whether it's realistic or not. It's certainly like as good as in terms of just like a character in a movie as many of those other performances. That part does not feel any more dated than those other more recent movies.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you know him from anything else other than Spider-Man, or?
So when I Googled him, the only other thing is that when I saw that he was Shame in the Batman TV show, and I do remember that character, I just I don't know that I made the connection that it was him, but I do remember Shame, the character, which is like this weird like cowboy villain.
It's a parody of Shane.
Yes. But again, like why that exists in the Batman universe, I'm not entirely sure, but that show
probably because Cliff Robertson called him up and was like, I want in on this.
Yeah, exactly.
Like many actors, like many other actors in a similar sort of mold, like Burgess Meredith. Who's
totally.
Also a TV movie kind of actor who is like, you know, he's on the Twilight Zone, but he's also in like Rocky. You know, Cliff Robertson's totally the same kind of actor who you would see on Batman.
Yeah, no, it makes sense that he's on Batman. It just less makes sense that it's a Western cowboy supervillain. Like, but again, this is the same show that had Egg.
I'm exhausted.
So who am I to judge?
Exactly. Yeah, so
but no,
like,
I don't remember it from literally anything else. Like I recognize the name. But when I started going through his IMDb, I was like, once I hit Spider-Man, I was like, oh, that's clearly what I'm remembering him from.
Totally. Yeah. The only movies I recognized him from were 3 Days of the Condor.
Okay.
And Escape from LA.
Oh, the one I haven't seen. I've only seen The Escape from New York. The superior escape film.
Yes, I would agree. So yeah, those are the two that I actually knew him from. But he's also, before this, he was in Gidget. He played JFK in PT 109.
Okay.
A movie that is referenced on The Simpsons.
Interesting. Okay.
And then he did a lot of TV. So like Batman, of course. He did The Outer Limits. Like again, it's just like classic actor of that era, and TV movies like the one from The Steel Hour. But here's an interesting thing that happened to him. So in 1977, Robertson blew the whistle on a film producer named David Begelman for embezzling money at Columbia Pictures. And Begelman was ousted from Columbia, but then quickly got work elsewhere in the industry. And Robertson claims he was basically blacklisted for the whole decade.
Interesting. Okay.
So like he has this huge gap of like, you know, actual, you know, movies that you would recognize, kind of from like the late 70s through the 80s, and then comes back with Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken in 91. So yeah, he's a very interesting guy for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. It's so tough to unpack something like this because, you know, I don't think the performance is necessarily bad, but I do think it's misguided. And I think maybe the whole film itself is misguided.
Right. It's more the endeavor than the performance, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Well, let's talk about Claire Bloom as Alice Kenyon a little bit. So kind of the other lead in the movie.
Totally.
All the other characters are a little bit, lightly drawn, let's say. But yeah, so this was originally going to be a role for Anne Haywood, but then she basically got like annoyed about, an aspect of her agreement. And dropped out of the movie, and Claire Bloom stepped in. Not an actress that I was super familiar with, but she actually has had quite a career. The only movie of hers I think I've seen is The King's Speech. She plays Queen Mary in The King's Speech. But prior to this movie, she was in Limelight, which is a late Charlie Chaplin movie.
Right.
That was in 1952. She's in The Haunting, a movie that I think has been on my watch list forever. And The Spy Who Came In From the Cold.
Okay. Yes. Right.
Classic of the genre. And then after this, she, the ones that I sort of recognized were Clash of the Titans.
Okay. Yeah.
She was in Shadowlands, which is a movie about C.S. Lewis that I was in the play version of when I was a child.
There you go.
Yeah. And then The King's Speech. So she's done a lot. Interesting. And she's a British actress. I think kind of known for her like sort of regal stature, hence Queen Mary, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, what did you think of Miss Kenyon in this?
I mean, she's fine. It's the classic case of these movies. Like the female characters are underwritten and basically exist to be love interests. Like there's something interesting about her at first, and then they just basically turn her into a love interest. We'll get into it, but yeah, I don't know. Like it's hard to again judge. Like I think her performance is very good, but there's not enough meat on that. It's not her movie, essentially.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I would say she's doing a lot with a little in this movie.
Yeah.
But it's not real because of the writing. It's not really enough to overcome the shortfalls of the character itself.
Exactly.
And yeah, we'll get into exactly what that means shortly, I think. But yeah, I don't think there's a lot more to say about her performance. I think she's like in many moments, it's like there's a lot of subtle work going on. Like you said, early in the movie, especially like just in her face and her looks. And there's a lot that has to happen silently in this movie that she does very, very well.
The scene where he asks her about Mr. Kinian. I thought,
Right.
like, again, there's some really lovely acting there where she's trying to explain, like, well, he's died, and like, there's. I think it's great. What you said is perfect. Like, she's doing a lot with a little.
Yeah. And then you have like just kind of the supporting performers. So you have like the two doctors that do the procedure,
Yeah.
which, I actually thought writing wise, it was like a smart move. You have these kind of two doctors that have opposing points of view on like philosophically, like what's the right thing to do with this patient and this procedure and all of that helps to kind of like, unravel the dilemma and sort of make it a little bit more explicit in the movie. So I think that's kind of clever. And then you have these work friends who are jerks and just feel to me like they're in a completely different movie. They feel like
100%.
they're, friends on the honeymooners or something.
Well, and I was immediately taken out of the movie because did you recognize one of them?
No.
So one of them is the actor plays Morty Seinfeld, Seinfeld's dad on Seinfeld.
Oh.
And so I just, as soon as I saw him, and he basically, like, he looks the exact same, just like younger. Yeah. I immediately am like, okay, well, this is just completely taking me out because it's Morty Seinfeld. Like, it's just, and from that, I think that was probably the minute where I was like, well, this movie's lost me, which is, like, it's not the
you're already
movie's
noticing
fault.
that stuff.
Yeah, but it's just like,
Yeah.
it's, and he's like, again, he's the one who, there's the scene where he's sort of making fun of Charlie and he's pushing the broom and he's making like a goofy face. And you're like, well, Charlie doesn't really do that. Like, it's just, they are, a caricature of like shitty human beings, and it's just
and of like working class Bostonians. Like,
like
I think
it's
there's like a bit of a weird class thing going on where it's just like these like I don't know buffoonish dummies who are like pushing him around. That part didn't really work for me very much, but I like the doctors.
The doctors. I do. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Let's talk about something that actually is kind of good in this movie.
Yeah.
Before we eviscerate, because I think this is after this, it's just going to be us dunking on this movie. Yeah. Opening credits, it says music by Ravi Shankar, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I do think the score is good. I like in the sense that I think musically it's good. I don't necessarily think it totally matches the tone of the movie or like works for the movie, but I do think the music is nice to listen to. I'm sure there's some interesting story behind Shankar's involvement, because again, as the Kino Lorber Blu-ray sort of mentions, like he goes on to score movies like Gandhi, which maybe feels more appropriate. But yeah, like what's your take on the score?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think it actually does work pretty well for the movie. But again, it's like one of many elements that just feels very, very much of the era.
I think that's what I'm trying to get at. It's like
it happens like right at this moment where Ravi Shankar is about to absolutely blow up in the West,
right?
Because essentially, this movie comes out right after George Harrison starts taking sitar lessons from Shankar in 1966. And then like starts incorporating like the Indian influences into the Beatles.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like
67 is Sgt. Pepper, which has like the famous song with all the sitar.
Right. Exactly. So you're just starting to hear this stuff like on your vinyl,
Right.
And then Ravi Shankar is kind of like wrapped up in the story of the Beatles, and then it just like has this whole ripple effect on pop culture.
Right.
But the interesting thing is that, like, Ralph Nelson claims that he liked Ravi Shankar before it was cool, because Nelson knew him from his work on, I'm going to totally butcher this, Satyajit Ray's Apu trilogy.
Right. Yeah.
Because he did the score for those movies in the 50s. And of course, those movies are the namesake for Apu on The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Respectfully or not. But I know Matt Groening actually loves those movies. So there you go. So anyway, that's how he knew about Ravi Shankar's music.
Fascinating. Okay.
And so he recruited him for this movie. And basically was like, they kind of negotiated a little bit, I think, about like what exactly the score would be. But Nelson sort of insisted that they use Western instrumentation. So there is not like sitar in this, for example. But other than that, kind of like let Shankar do it however he wanted. So
Right.
I found this like on the vinyl, I think, for the soundtrack. They have like liner notes that explain all of this.
Right.
But apparently Shankar showed up at the recording studio with no annotated score.
Wow.
And was basically like, we're just going to like, I want to like see these musicians in action, and kind of like selected the ones that are good at improv and developed the score with them in the studio.
That's kind of cool.
And so it like took longer, but like in the end, you end up with this kind of very unique sounding score that I think is really excellent. It's very, very unique. And again, because it doesn't actually have the Indian instrumentation, it is probably pretty unique in Ravi Shankar's, like, you know, whatever the word is, discography.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we?
Yeah, we got to talk about the plot of this, because...
Oh, God.
This is, you know, we've talked about the premise, but like the actual events in this movie, I think are really where it falls apart for me. And I think there's lots of interesting stuff that I like in this movie, but this is where it really lost me. So
yeah. Like this to me feels like a classic case of like, when I found out it was based on a short story and then based on like a short like teleplay or whatever, I'm like, yeah, and that probably is the way that this should be. Like sometimes like it feels like in the attempt to flesh it out to a feature length, they had to add a bunch of stuff, and it's that bunch of stuff that they added that sort of makes it not work.
Totally.
And that's not, there are lots of things like that I think that's the tricky thing with adaptation, and why sometimes certain things are best suited for the medium that they start in and don't really work as film adaptations.
Yeah. This is a Twilight Zone episode.
100%. That is the definitive way that this story should be told.
Right. And so, to your point, in the process of them adding a bunch of stuff to the plot, one of the key things that they changed between the short story and the book and then this adaptation is that Miss Kenyon in the book is just one of several relationships that Charly has.
Right.
And instead, in the movie, they tried to turn it into this romance between the two of them. And in the middle of this romance, he sexually assaults her.
Yeah.
And then she rapidly forgives him. And that's the part that's like unforgivable as a storytelling device to me.
Which, okay, so we need to unpack this, because so basically he notices her on a date with another, or is it a date, or like she's with the other doctor.
Yeah.
And he comes to her house with a present. This is after he has undergone the surgery and is now intelligent.
And we know that he's been sort of checking her out. Like,
yes, there's been multiple scenes of him leering at her. And
which, like, to be fair, like that part it's at first when I was watching it, I was like, okay, I get it. It's kind of interesting. However, it also implies that, like, you know, when he had a disability, he had no sex drive.
Right.
Which also is kind of weird territory.
Yeah. And they've alluded to that because the shitty friends kind of make reference to the fact that he's spending time with this beautiful teacher character. So he goes to her house with a gift. And we should also say earlier in the film, she encourages him to invite her upstairs to his apartment. Right. And his landlady makes a comment about it and is like, oh, Charlie Gordon has a woman in his house. Like, oh, better keep the door open. Stuff like this. Like, all very sort of like, and no sex, please, we're British situations.
Right. But there is sort of this implication, which is, again, interesting. This is where the movie is interesting to me, is that, like, there's an implication that Miss Kenyon is attracted to Charlie before he gets his surgery.
Yes.
It's not a result of the surgery. It's almost like it kind of gives her permission, or he doesn't have the, you know, it's implied, again, this is not true, but it's implied in the movie that perhaps he does not have the ability to have a relationship with her before he has the surgery. So it kind of unlocks it, but the attraction, it's implied, I think, is there prior to.
And this idea that, like, again, she's a good person because she's just attracted to the human at its core and not, you know, the superhuman with superhuman intelligence or whatever.
Right.
So all this has happened. Then he goes to her house and they sit and they're having a conversation, and she opens the gift and he's given her this mirror that is very ornate and elaborate and blah, blah, blah. And then basically he what I've heard referred to as power kissing in the 60s, which James Bond, Sean Connery did a lot of power kissing in those movies.
Yes.
But and then it sort of moves into a full-blown attempted sexual assault, and she screams at him like, "Who would ever be attracted to you?" or something to that effect.
And she calls him a moron.
Yeah.
In that
then rapid cut to this absolutely batshit insane sequence that feels like it comes out of the movie Head, and like he's riding a motorcycle and he's got a beard and he's doing go-go dancing, and I have no idea what this whole scene is supposed to imply.
It's funny, I learned this term from our musical series, but I think I would best describe it as a dream ballet.
Right.
It's like in a musical, the dream ballet is a sort of expressive sequence that happens often at exactly this moment in the course of the story, where things are kind of rising to their maximum tension, where you'd have a dance sequence that has no narrative, it's very visual, and that's kind of what this is. It's just like we're taking a break from the story for a moment to express the psychological state of the main characters purely through montage. And it's really unclear to me whether this happens or not.
Well, and this is where I take issue from this point on, because then we see a sequence where he and Miss Kinnian are going on romantic trips.
Well, there's a scene in between. So like he has his crazy journey. So it's like literally like, he's on a motorcycle. There are other women with him on the motorcycle.
Well, and there's there is a moment that I actually think is pretty cool. So it's like they do some weird like step printing animation, and then there's a shot of him on a motorcycle, and then a motorcycle crashes through the image of him on the motorcycle.
Right.
Like it's like on paper, and I was like, that's kind of cool. Totally out of place in this movie. It makes absolutely no sense, but like is a cool moment.
Yes. And so there's and then it's intercut with these like frames of him dancing in like a mod costume.
Yeah, with
and
a bunch
so
of go-go dancers.
Which again, so this actor is 45 at this point in time.
Like this is it's
referencing,
comical.
But it's referencing youth culture of the time, right? And so, but there's this sort of idea of like, okay, like he's done this horrible thing. I'm not sure how much the movie really grapples with it as a horrible thing.
I don't think it grapples with it at all, because it's the 60s, and like I said, power kissing is very common in movies. Like,
right. But it's sort of implied, like, I think what's very clear from the sequence, because again, it's using split screen and, we can talk about it a little bit more, but like this technique that becomes popular called multi-dynamic image technique, right? And it's basically like putting frames on top of each other with different aspect ratios and all of that. I think the one thing you could definitely take away from this is that he is fractured in this moment, right?
Okay.
It's this sort of like multiple... Not literally multiple personalities, but different versions of himself competing with one another, and then eventually when it's done, it goes back to his apartment, and she comes in, and they kind of like back in the narrative world, they kind of make amends somehow.
Well, but see, this is where I take issue.
This is the problem.
This
is a huge problem.
So it uses it continues to use split screen imagery in that sequence. Yes. And then it goes into this very dreamy sort of like soft focus of them going on dates, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, super corny love montage.
Like saccharinely sweet, like just dreadful, awful moment. Yeah. And then you get the image that was used on the one sheet of like they make a little boat and they cast the boat out in the river, and then we cut back to the scientists, and they're getting ready for the final display. You know, they have the big conference, and they're gonna show off Charly and like this incredible scientific achievement. And Charly and Miss Kinnian arrive arm in arm with champagne, and I go, wait, that wasn't a dream sequence? Because and maybe I'm just dumb, I don't know, but I just assumed, because you have this crazy dream ballet, but then the visual language that is used there kind of continues through the following scenes. I just assumed that this was all a fantasy in his head, because she said, who could ever love you? And now he's like fantasizing about, well, what if she did? But no, apparently that is all actually happening within the context of the film, and I was just like, this makes no fucking sense.
No,
like,
that's totally fair.
And like, to your point, like it's absurd that this guy sexually assaults her, and then she does a complete 180 with absolutely no explanation whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it's bad on two levels. It's bad on a formalism level of just like the way you've constructed this makes no sense, and it's bad on a plot level of like she should. What are you talking about? How does this happen?
So here's
it made me so angry.
Here's what I would say is I kind of like the dream ballet, right? The like crazy like what the hell is going on moment. I think the cardinal sin is when it comes back and yada yadas over their conflict over what happened.
Yes.
Right? Where it's like she just instantly forgives him, and then they have like a love montage, and it just kind of like fast forwards their relationship, and they never actually address what happened. And like, so it's that moment where, you know, the underwriting of this female character actually comes home to roost in the story, where it's like the story fails because you have not actually grappled with what this means, what that moment meant to Miss Kenyon. Yeah. And instead she just becomes a sort of like totally rote love interest character.
Exactly.
And that's the part that sucks to me. I could have dealt with the like crazy, like, you know, biker mod, you know, split screen montage thing if it then came back to reality and they had a fight where she told him how inappropriate it was, and he apologized, and they worked through it in some meaningful way. I mean, again, it's still really hard to come back from.
Yeah.
But like you could understand that it's like this guy is going through this kind of crazy change, right? Really rapidly. And they kind of talk about this. This is where the scientists come in. They kind of talk about this throughout the movie of like, you know, yeah, he's like learning intellectually, but you're not actually addressing like his emotional growth as a person and all of the changes in his life and all of that. You can kind of like, they were building up to something interesting there, and then they just like biffed it. Totally biffed it.
And again, look, we have to put this in the context of the era. Like, you look at stuff like Mad Men, you look at stuff like the James Bond movies. Like, this was of an era where a man making a move like that wouldn't necessarily be seen as problematic as it is seen today.
Yeah, so not unforgivable in the way that it is.
Exactly. So in that sense, I don't necessarily fault the characters, as you say, for not for her overcoming that and still falling in love with him or whatever. Like, I can let that go because of the context of the time. But it's, as you say, the fact that it's never addressed, and more specifically, I think from a formal filmmaking standpoint, it's problematic because it was not clear to me that we have exited this experimental dream sequence and are back in reality because the director does not do a good enough job of differentiating between the two.
Totally.
And let's be clear, you know, 10 minutes later or 15 minutes later after the big denouement, we get another sort of dream sequence that I agree with you, Nate. I like that this is the only visually interesting parts of these two movies or parts of this movie. And there's a sequence where he envisions himself as a human trapped in a maze, and it's in black and white, and it's like, but it's making a very clear distinction of this is a fantasy sequence. And that's what I struggle with, is that the film doesn't really know how to handle its visual language.
Yeah.
Which I think if we're ready to
talk about it.
I was going to say, if we're ready to move on, I really want to talk about the use of split screen, because I think that is, again, a prime example of the filmmaker not understanding how to use the technological advances that they're using. Because I don't think this film uses split screen in a way that works at all.
See, okay, so this is really interesting. I mean, I do want to back up a little bit on the split screen and just like point out, like, this is one of the things that makes this 100% of its era.
Yes.
Like, this is an incredibly 1968 movie, and it's partly because of the extent to which it uses split screen and like the specific ways that it does.
Well, yeah, let's unpack that, and then we can unpack my issues with it, sort of whether or not it achieves what it sets out to do. But
totally. So okay, so it's basically like split screen. You know, it's always been a thing in cinema. Like from the very, very beginning, there were like split screen type techniques that often were used for like special effects.
Yeah, a lot of double exposures or stuff like that.
Right. Exactly. And so, but the interesting thing is in the 60s, it really starts to blow up as kind of like a stylistic technique that has like, you know, firm lines between the two sides, and you can really see the distinction, that kind of stuff. So part of it's really actually pegged around two World's Fairs. So the 1964 World's Fair in New York, there's a movie called To Be Alive by Francis Thompson that makes extensive use of split screen as like a stylistic technique, and that starts to get some attention to it, right? And soon after that, you get the movie Grand Prix, which actually I think came up sometime this year in our discussions. But Saul Bass did, the famous Saul Bass did the opening credits for that, making extensive use of split screen in that. But there were sort of limits on this. A lot of it was using split screen for duplication. So like in Grand Prix, for example, you have one shot that's duplicated across the screen, like across like maybe 24 different frames on the screen at once. But they're all the same thing. And Saul Bass famously said of this, like, yeah, I think split screen is really interesting, but it's pretty much good at expressing muchness, and that's about it.
Right.
Right. So he thought it was very limited. But in 67, Expo 67 in Montreal, so there's a Canadian connection there, which is really exciting. Christopher Chapman did a movie called A Place to Stand in the Ontario Pavilion. And he kind of like took this whole thing to the next level with this idea of multi-dynamic image technique. Right. And as I said, I think the main difference, from what I understand, it's that you have multiple frames on the screen that have different aspect ratios and are overlapping and showing different aspects of the action.
Yes. And we should also just, if I'm not mistaken, Expo 67 is like, it's this really interesting time in cinema history, but especially in like from the Canadians' perspective, because I believe that is also where what is to become IMAX is first debuted.
Yes.
Which people forget is it is actually a Canadian invention. It is very much a Canadian thing. And it made its debut at Expo 67. And I think in that same pavilion, like there is a famous movie that is making use of both this very large format film, but combined with sort of large format and sort of split screen technologies and all that stuff.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's this very, very important thing. This is like one of my gripes about the way that Canadian history is taught to younger people, is that you basically don't even get up to the 60s. Like you talk a little bit about Quebec separatism, but that's about it. And it's like, this is one of the most formative moments in Canadian identity, period, including things like film and design and all sorts of stuff. So anyway, it's this really pivotal moment. And this film has this sort of massive ripple effect where all of these imitators start using this particular type of split screen technique.
Right.
Now, unfortunately for Charly, a little movie called The Thomas Crown Affair comes out on June 26th, 1968, 2 days before this movie premiered at the Berlin Film Festival. And the Thomas Crown Affair kind of ate Charly's lunch when it comes to using the multi-dynamic image technique. It famously, for example, has a lot of different montages in it that use this sort of like crazy split screen format. But one of the most famous ones is a polo match that was apparently edited down from 15 minutes to 2 minutes by showing all of the different actions simultaneously on screen. I don't really like that movie very much. And it's actually partly because of these sequences where it's like, let's just watch Thomas Crown fly a plane for a while. Let's watch a polo game where I'm like, what is this?
Why are we wasting time on this?
It is quite technically impressive, I will say, and also reflective of this moment in time. And then kind of soon after this, it goes out of style for like a long time and kind of comes back in the 2000s. We mentioned the Tracy fragments as like a recommendation in our episode about 32 short films about Glenn Gould. It's a great example of this technique in action, probably the most robust example of this technique in action that you can still find out there. Adam, tell me about your experience of it.
Okay, so I have always loved split screen. And I think my love of split screen came from the TV series Regenesis, which interestingly enough also features a character who is, I believe he's meant to be on the autism spectrum. Right. And I am not, so I can't say with any authority, but I think is generally, or at least at the time, was considered to be a very nuanced and effective portrayal of someone who is on the spectrum, but is working as a scientist in a lab and is clearly incredibly intelligent, but lacks sort of the social skills to connect with other people. And I think it's considered to be a very good representation of...
And at the very least, he's like a distinctive person,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And that's like, I think, a key part of when these performances are maybe more on the
and most
successful
importantly, I think, although maybe in the later seasons less so, and it does actually kind of get to be a bit Charlie-esque in the final season.
Oh no!
When the show goes completely off the rails. But I think at least for the first 2 seasons, his character is not defined by his disability.
Right.
Like, that is not what his that is just, it happens to be something about the character, but that is not what is moving the plot along or moves his character arc along. Like, he is just a respected scientist who happens to have this this situation.
Yeah.
But we're talking about split screen. So that show makes ample use of split screen, along with other techniques. One of the techniques that I like to refer to as the Prince of Persia technique, where a scene will play out and then all of a sudden it will pause and sort of rewind, and it will pick up a conversation from 2 minutes earlier between 2 characters, and we followed the one character the first time around, but now we're going to follow the other character and see what happened when that conversation split off, which is a kind of an interesting technique that I had never really seen done before.
Yeah.
But it uses split screen in a less sort of showy way, and it uses it as a means of, it's kind of like you were sort of getting at with the Thomas Crown Affair thing of like, okay, we're talking about a complex scientific concept. So as the person on screen is talking about it, we can actually illustrate it in a split screen by showing you what the biomechanism is doing.
Right.
Or because this story takes place across multiple locations, we can show the scientists who are trying to solve the problem in Mexico with the scientists in Toronto who have the lab technology and are running the tests, and we can see these things happening concurrently, and it's condensing story. It's making use of it in a creative way to forward the story in a way that you couldn't do as quickly without split screens.
Right.
I think about other things like Woodstock, one of my favorite documentaries about the Woodstock Music Festival, where they basically straight up said, we had so much footage.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to show it all. The only way we could do that is we're like, well, let's just show 3 things at once. And that was very much that movie was groundbreaking in terms of like the technical achievement and how they even figured out how to make that happen. Like they had to buy multiple Steenbecks and they had to buy multiple projectors. And when they were screening it before the optical print was ready to go, like, it was just this massive technical undertaking, led by the great Thelma Schoonmaker, Martin Scorsese's go-to editor. Like, but again, it really puts you in the space and allows you to be like, this is what it kind of would have been like to experience it, because in front of you, you can see the concert happening. But if you were to look to the 2 sides, you can see the audience just completely enraptured by the music.
Right.
Or like another great example of, it's kind of around this era, Brian De Palma loves his visual spectacle. And
once it had gone out of fashion, Brian De Palma was like, I'm just going to keep doing it forever.
Exactly. Between the split diopters and the split screen, like you look at a movie like Carrie and the famous prom scene sequence. And again, I think it achieves a similar thing. You can see Carrie on stage, but then the split screen allows you to put her in her head, and it allows you to see what she's achieving in the space, while at the same time always staying focused in one part of the screen on Carrie's face and her emotional response in the moment. So those are all examples of using split screen to further the narrative or to do something that you couldn't otherwise do by just having the camera be focused on one place at one point in time. Charly never seems to do this. I don't really understand when it's using its split screen, why it's using its split screen, or what it's trying to say. A perfect example of this would be, if I were the director, where would I, and I decided, I want to use split screen. Where would I use it? I would use it during the races with Algernon to show where Charly is, where Algernon is, and you could actually experience that race concurrently. It never does that. It will do it where it's Miss Kinion's holding up a card and we're seeing Charly react to the card, but but like she's not really going through anything emotionally, so like I don't really need to see what she's doing. It's not achieving anything that just cutting back and forth between two shots would achieve. And then again, the sequence where she comes back to his apartment and you're sort of on both of them at the same time. Again, you're bringing in the split screen that you were using in a dream sequence into the reality of the thing in a way that doesn't really make sense. So I don't think it ever actually achieves any storytelling purpose and just feels like a visual flex that I actually think is actively harming the storytelling because, like I said, it made me think that sequence in the apartment was part of a dream sequence and was not part of the actual reality of the film. Yeah. So that's my take. I think it just doesn't know how to use this technology, and it's just doing it to be like, it's the 60s, this is cool, this is how we can differentiate ourselves.
Right. It's like the first time you discover Photoshop filters. Yes. I mean, maybe. And I think, so I rewatched it yesterday morning on 1.5 speed so I could listen to the commentary, right?
Right.
And my experience of the split screen the first time I watched it was very similar to yours, where I was like, why is this happening, right? The second time, and they actually don't talk about it that much on the commentary, but the second time I watched it, I knew it was coming, and I was kind of like ready to be like, okay, when is it used and why?
Right.
And in that context, I started to kind of, I think, understand their thesis for how they're using split screen.
Okay.
Now, whether it has the intended effect is a whole other thing.
Right.
But I think that it's using it in kind of three ways. One, it uses it for moments where a character is reflecting back at the other character. So, like, it's almost like a mirror.
Okay.
So, like,
That's interesting. Yeah.
The scene where that you mentioned, where Miss Kenyon and Charlie are like in the test room, and she's showing him a picture or like a drawing of like a family, and trying to get him to kind of identify the members of the family, is this kind of moment of like her showing him himself, right? And there's a couple other moments. Like one of the other times that they use the same style is when Miss Kenyon goes to visit the female scientist whose name I can't remember. And it's actually the scene where they do actually have a number of children that have intellectual disabilities in the set around them.
Yes.
And they're sort of working with the kids while they're having this conversation. And the female doctor is kind of revealing to Miss Kenyon her attraction to Charlie, right? So she's actually kind of telling her something that she doesn't know she knows yet, right? So it's this kind of mirroring sequence.
Interesting.
The interesting thing is there are actually two different ways that it uses this kind of split screen with two different characters. One of them, the two sides are very close together, and they have a very thin black line between them.
Yep.
There's a different way that it's also used that I think represents confrontation. And so the first time it's used is when Charlie's coworker realizes that he can now do what he does at his job.
Yes.
Right. And it shows a split screen of the two of them, and it's zooming in on both of them at the same time, simultaneously, side by side. And those are more like these sort of like squares that are far apart from each other on the screen. Right. And that's the confrontation split screen. And the interesting thing is the other time that's used is when Miss Kenyon comes back after the sexual assault, and it's the two of them in the room. And so it's this it is another confrontation. Now the script doesn't live up to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's like a non-confrontation, but the visual language is telling you it's a confrontation.
Yeah.
And then the third way is the fragmentation, right?
Yes.
Which is that's the whole dream ballet thing where it's like it goes bonkers with the split screen, and I think it successfully communicates fragmentation. But beyond that, maybe not. It doesn't quite move the story and the characters forward in the way that they want it to. So I agree that I think in effect it's quite messy, but I do think that they have a thesis. It just may not be totally communicating it effectively.
Yeah. Let's talk about the ending, because whether or not we consider it satisfying, I certainly didn't. But there is something interesting there to unpack. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I mean, the sort of climax and the end of this movie, right? They have this scientific convention. Charlie is the main act. This actually felt very Elephant Man to me. This whole kind of like setup of like the audience in the dark, and he's in front of them and all of that. And he takes questions and answers and kind of like predicts the future a little bit or something.
Yes.
And all of the people in the audience are very
again,
shocked.
Speaking to the visual language, there's lots of Dutch angles for reasons that I'm sure made sense to the director, but don't necessarily make sense to us, the audience.
Very Twilight Zone coded, I think.
Yes, very much so.
And so, yeah, basically he reveals how smart he is to the audience, but then also reveals that he's figured out that Algernon, the rat, who has undergone the same procedure as him, has died. Yeah. And therefore he believes that he will regress and then die. And then the rest of the movie, he is kind of like another montage of him like trying to figure out like whether or not like this procedure can be saved and all that kind of stuff. He finds out it's a dead end. And that kind of like brings us to the tail end where like Miss Kenyon comes to the apartment and kind of, you know, says that she wants to be with him while he goes through this. And he says no. And then it goes back to the scene that we see at the beginning of him playing on the playground joyfully, and it's sort of implied that he's gone back to his like, you know, earlier self before the procedure, and they don't actually show him dying, but it's sort of implied, I guess, that he would go on to die like the rat.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the ending. And then actually one important detail: the credits go back to that corny ass shot of the tiny boat on the river.
Yeah.
But this is actually important to, I think, how you're supposed to read the ending, which is that shot is used in the corny ass love montage over a spoken line when Miss Kenyon says that true love is letting go. And so I think it's visually meant to tie back to her sort of sentiment, which is that like she had to let him go because she does truly love him,
right? Which
is honestly a really like corny sort of thing to take away from this story. It's not, I don't think, what the author intended originally.
No, exactly.
So, Adam, what did you think about this ending?
So again, my issue was that like I found the denouement to be a little quick. Like he's like backstage and he sees the dead rat and then he comes to the conclusion that, oh, I'm going to die too. And he like, again, it's one of these things of like, I'm kind of comparing it in my mind to the Simpsons thing of like Homer realizes that just because you're intelligent doesn't mean you're going to be happy. Yeah. And that feels motivated by the things that he experiences. Whereas Charlie doesn't really seem to, and I get that that's not necessarily what the movie is trying to say. So I can't really fairly compare them, but it feels like it just sort of takes a very quick turn, like 180 turn of this reveal that the rat has died. And then Miss Kenyon gets upset and goes and speaks to the other scientists. And she finds out that this has apparently happened to a bunch of the rats, but they were like, we thought it was just a fluke and we didn't think it was going to happen to Charlie. And like, so there's all this sort of like plot machination that really should have been set up maybe a little bit earlier, or like seeds planted or something to make that payoff feel a little more authentic. And then, yeah, you end like that sort of. It's interesting. I thought the final sequence with him on the in the playground, I thought it was meant to be sort of like elliptical, and this idea that what we were seeing at the beginning was actually the end, and like not that it was like meant to be him returning to where he was. But I just sort of took it as, oh, that opening montage. That's actually we're seeing the end of the movie before it all plays out, kind of thing.
Sure.
But whether or not that's true, I don't know. Like, I guess you can kind of read into it however you want to.
Yeah, and it kind of like the meaning of it's the same either way, but it's an interesting way to read it that's kind of like a flash forward rather than the beginning of the story.
But what I would say is that, interestingly enough, one of my first notes is like, I hated that opening because
it's condescending.
It's so condescending, and it's like it's the one moment where I think he doesn't give a more humanized performance. It sort of set me up to think, oh my god, this guy this is going to be like Rain Man, I Am Sam level of like just completely unrealistic portrayal of this type of person. And
just the idea that it's communicating is like he's a child trapped in a man's body, which is not the case. He is an adult with a disability who has had, again, if he's the age of the actor, 45 years of life experience.
Yeah. And the rest of the film doesn't participate in any sort of activity. Like he takes the bus. Like he's actually remarkably self-sufficient. So it's just, alienating your audience in the first 2 minutes of the film is never a good idea. But So, yeah, I don't think the ending feels earned, but I also was just like knowing in the back of my head that, again, this was a an adaptation of a short story, I was like, I have to imagine that maybe this all feels much more earned and works a lot better in the short form, but it's just in their misguided attempt at expanding the story, they expanded this romance subplot instead of maybe expanding on the elements that would then make the denouement feel more earned.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work for me. And yeah, like again, to call this movie an emotional tearjerker, gut-wrenching watch, it's like not in the least. Like I did not feel that way in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think like the big takeaway for me is just like the back half of this movie is mostly montage, which I think says to me that that's a story problem where it's like you've compressed this so much at the end that you haven't given the most important parts of the story a chance to breathe, and it really feels that way. It feels rushed all the way to the very, very end. Yeah. I like Miss Kenyon's character at the beginning of this movie quite a bit, and you don't really get her grappling with this enough, really. No, exactly. Among many other things that are kind of short shrift. So yeah, it's a bummer. I feel like it's other than the very, very beginning with the playground and everything, it's a movie that kind of felt like it had a lot of potential, but then the back half really lets it down a lot. Well, Adam, should we do a Simpsons speed round on this movie?
I think we should. Let's head into the Simpsons speed round.
All right, Adam. Are there any moments in this movie that feel like Simpsons jokes but aren't?
I will say that the workplace quote-unquote friends do feel like the sort of power plant co-workers of Homer's. Like there's that, I don't remember the episode specifically, but when Lenny's like, wait a minute, everyone, he's gonna do something stupid. And like, that's just like very, I don't know, they very much felt Simpson-y just because of like, as I said, they're so caricaturish and so out of place in this movie, but if you were to drop them into the Springfield nuclear power plant, they would fit right in.
Yeah, totally.
Nate, did you learn anything about The Simpsons from this movie?
I think we kind of touched on it, but just like this parody does feel like it's kind of a tacit acknowledgement that about how Homer has gotten so dumb by this point. But so it's just like, I'm not sure if this parody would have worked earlier, right? But by season 12, it's like the perfect thing to kind of touch on that thing that everyone's talking about.
Totally.
Okay, Adam, does this movie still have some juice for more Simpsons parodies? I'm going to say no, personally.
So parody, maybe not, but I think referentially, like I think that the quote-unquote Dream Ballet sequence, I could see them stealing the visual language of that. Like, Homer, a character is fantasizing about them being a motorcycle guy and then doing like Austin Powers dancing. Like they've kind of done all of those visually in other like separate episodes, but I could see like it doing something like that where they're like, we're gonna reference this crazy sequence from this movie where it's completely out of place. But yeah, I think there's something there.
Yeah, or maybe even like just the multi-dynamic image technique. I wonder if they've done that kind of split screen on the show or not very much.
Are there any characters in this movie that could become a recurring side character?
Okay, so we haven't talked about her, but I would say the Irish landlady, especially because
I did like her.
Yes, and the Simpsons, of course, love to make fun of the Irish, but yeah, there's this sort of like stereotypical landlady that lives in the same building as Charlie, and she's always got curlers in her hair, and
it's implied at first that she's always talking to like an off-screen husband, and then you find out that she's actually talking to her like pet.
Yes, her dog, her like big wrinkly dog. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, that definitely feels like I could see her fitting into Springfield, no problem.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Adam, are there other movies by this director or in this franchise that The Simpsons should parody?
No, I can't. I mean, I don't know this director very well, but I don't think so. You did a little more research. What about you?
So my take is, what about Charly 2?
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe.
a Homer sequel episode.
Oh, dear.
That could be interesting. I have no idea where this story would go from there, but I could see there being a little bit of juice in that.
Okay, maybe.
You're like, no, absolutely not.
Wow. Well, that brings us to our final verdicts. Nate, did the strengths outweigh the weaknesses?
I mean, I can comfortably say that the weaknesses definitely outweigh the strengths with this movie, but it is a very interesting time capsule of like both our, again, like so many things, our understanding of disability, that whole trajectory of like Oscar bait movies, split screen. Like there's a lot that's in here that's interesting. Yeah. But man, it does not add up to a satisfying movie experience for me. What about you?
Yeah, I think this is a kind of movie that if you're studying it contextually, like if you were in a Cinema 101 class and you're looking, or maybe like Oscar bait 101 class, and you're charting the trajectory of this kind of movie or something, like it's interesting in that standpoint. And like you said, I think visually there's some interesting stuff to unpack here. But as a piece of entertainment and as a piece of like something that you should just watch on a Saturday night like I did, absolutely not. This movie is dreadful.
Yeah.
And it's kind like, as I said, there are things that work, and I was shocked at how not nuanced, but how arguably respectful the performance was at the heart of it, and how far away 20 years later they kind of go from that. But no, I could not wait for this movie to end. Like I kept checking. Like I feel like every 5 minutes I was like grabbing the remote and being like, okay, how much is left? How much is left? How much is like? It's just no. I would not recommend this movie at all.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
In terms of extra credit, though, like what would you suggest to either pair with this or maybe watch in lieu of this?
Yeah, so I think watching in lieu of this, I would consider The Elephant Man. I think it kind of grapples with a lot. Well, I mean, we've talked about it. It grapples with a lot of the same issues, but it still feels quite contemporary. And I think it benefits from a few things. I think the fact that it is a period piece and it's in black and white, and it almost has a kind of sci-fi horror feel to it.
Yeah, I was going to say the stylization of that film is being handled by someone who actually is a good visual stylist, and it serves the story as opposed to actively works against it.
Yes.
Like it did here, maybe.
I mean, I was also thinking, I haven't seen this, but on my watch list, I was also thinking about A Different Man, which came out last year.
Right, yes. I haven't seen that either, but
even more like this movie in many ways. Again, it's a physical disability, but he has a surgery to change his appearance and then lives on the other side of that surgery and kind of grapples with it. And
perhaps unlike this movie, actually features a actor who has that physical disability as well as the actor who is portraying someone who undergoes that treatment. So yeah, right. I haven't seen it, but I have to imagine it handles it with a great deal more nuance and respect. But maybe 15 years down the line, we're going to look back on that and treat it the same way. Who knows?
Totally. What about you, Adam?
Well, I alluded to it before, but I'm going to say Woodstock. Like, it couldn't be more different from this. But I think, like, I love that movie. It's interesting. I tend to watch it every couple summers. It's a very summery movie because it's like outdoor film or outdoor music festival. I like a lot of the bands in it. Some of it is a little too hippy dippy shit that I skip when I watch, because especially the director's cut is like 3.5 hours long. So yeah, it is pretty easy to just skip through the performances you're not into. But as a filmmaker, wannabe filmmaker, as an editor, it is a fascinating from a technical achievement. And again, like, it was actually when I went on my honeymoon, I read a book by the people who made the film just about the making of the film, and the making of the film is almost as fascinating, if not more, than the film itself. It's one of these things that's like begging for a documentary or even a biopic of like how they pulled this off, because they absolutely should not have. But it's also interesting too, because it's like, if this film hadn't come out, I don't think Woodstock would have become this sort of cultural landmark that it did. It was this film's, the fact that this film sort of lauds this moment in time and allows it to act as documentation for, the 50 years that follow, that Woodstock becomes this cultural iconic event that it does. But it's just one of many festivals like it that happened in and around the same period. In fact, the same year Charly comes out, there's a movie called Monterey Pop that comes out by D.A. Pennebaker and is very sort of similar. It's a very similar festival, and it just doesn't have the same cultural staying power that Woodstock does. So it's a really fascinating movie to me, and I think even if you're not like into 70 or I guess late 60s rock music and sort of folk music, it's still worth checking out because it's this great time capsule, and just from a technical standpoint, it's incredible what they achieve. And I've always wanted to see it projected. I've never had a chance to see it in a theater, but I if that opportunity ever arises, I will jump on it, and I think if you're in the audience, you should too, because I have to imagine seeing the sort of what they do with split screens in a theater would just be like mind-blowing.
Yeah, totally. It just brings me back to that moment of watching the Tracy fragments, and like
exactly.
That's just such a one of a kind experience, seeing that projected. So yeah, that sounds amazing, and like a great comparison point for like the techniques in this movie, and probably a superior version of the same ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave us a review and share this episode with the Simpson fans and film buffs in your life. It really does make a difference. We've also set up a support page on our website where, if you want, you can throw us a couple of bucks to help cover the costs of making this show. Every little bit helps. We really do appreciate it. And coming up next is another movie this movie I think maybe does exist, though I didn't really know about it. And certainly I don't think a lot of people know the Simpsons connection. And it wasn't until, spoiler alert, Spike Lee tipped me off to this movie that I then was like, hey, wait a minute. That's a Simpsons episode. And so it is the movie Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole. So, this one is this is a Criterion movie. So like, that's why I say it
more
does
accessible than Charly, but not super well known either.
Yeah, I don't think it's as well known, at least among a certain generation. So I'm really looking forward to watching that and unpacking that and getting to the heart of the Simpsons reference therein. So until then, Nate,
we'll see you around the Plex.
I'm sending you right now, because I just pulled up Nelson's filmography and was just sort of like, because I don't recognize any of these. And then I saw this, and then I saw the poster, and this, I need you to see what this is a movie called The Wrath of God.
Oh, yes.
Check out this poster.
What is happening in that poster?
This poster makes me want to see it. The tagline, introducing Father Van Horn. He's not exactly what the Lord had in mind, and it is a priest with a machine gun.
Wow.
And starring Robert Mitchum. I want to see, Frank Langella, too. I want to see this movie.
Pretty good.
This looks
Rita
awesome. Yeah.
So on the commentary for this movie, I think they talk about this and are like, it's actually pretty good.
Well, there you go. So, I'm going to try and catch a screening of The Wrath of God.
Amazing. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's an interesting Western to add to the watch list.
Exactly.
But Adam, do you recall any other movies that might have come out this year? You just read off a few.
Yeah, so, I mean, again, I was not around in 1968.
Sure.
Don't know much about 1968. So I pulled up, to give myself a little bit of some help, I pulled up a IMDb list of the year's best movies, and I figured I could use that to sort of approximate maybe some positions. So I'm guessing Oliver, because again, it was a musical. I know it was a massive hit. I'm guessing that's like right in the top 3, maybe top 5.
It's on the list, but it's actually number 6.
Oh, okay. So not as high as I thought. But yeah, I really have knowing that.
Let me give you some hints.
Yeah, give me some hints. Hints.
Okay. So one of these we have covered on the podcast.
Okay, this one from the list I know it would be Planet of the Apes, but I have no idea where it lands.
Correct. So that's number 8 on the list.
Okay, interesting. Okay, wow, geez.
All right. So this is kind of a fun one because there's a recent connection here. So number 3 is a movie starring a famous duo that we've covered on the podcast.
Oh, okay. Again, from looking at that list, I'm guessing that's The Odd Couple.
Indeed, The Odd Couple.
Interesting. Okay, so number 3, a pretty straightforward comedy, which, again, this is speaking to the era, I think.
Yes, for sure. You mentioned another movie that was snubbed famously at the Oscars this year. And, it reflects sort of a change, I guess, in the way that we even think about the categories of the Oscars.
Right.
But what movie do you think I'm talking about?
Oh, I don't know. Give me the genre.
Sci-fi.
Oh, what, 2001?
2001. It's number 2.
Okay, wow. I'm surprised it's that high. Well, I guess maybe I'm not surprised it's that high, but I guess I kind of am because again, it's just I feel like in my mind that's a movie that like retroactively gets the like laudence that it has, but I'm surprised it was that successful upon initial release. Okay, well now I'm really
everyone's getting high and going and watching that movie.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's
That's
like
true.
The special effects I think were considered really very trippy for the time. So
I genuinely have no idea. Is Bullet on the list?
Bullet's up there. Bullet's number 4.
Okay,
there are 2 Shakespeare movies in the top 10.
Okay, yes, because this is the Zeffirelli Romeo and not plus Juliet.
Not Romeo
that's,
plus
that's,
Juliet.
That's Lerman. Okay, yeah, so Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, a movie we had to watch in school that includes like child nudity.
Yeah, it's problematic,
Dated, to say the least.
I have no idea.
You've already name dropped it.
Oh, I did?
When you were talking about the Oscars.
Oh shit.
It's a stuffy movie that I don't think anyone watches anymore unless maybe you're a giant Shakespeare head.
Is it that The Lion in Winter?
The Lion in Winter.
That's a Shakespeare movie?
I believe so. It's like a movie, or it's a play that I don't think is considered like one of his best known plays. But yes, I've seen it. I actually saw it at the Globe Theatre in London. Okay.
Oh, it's okay. It is a play about Henry II, but I don't think it's not Shakespeare.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
No, it's a 1966 play by James Goldman.
Really?
Yeah, brother of William Goldman. Oh, the aforementioned William Goldman. There you go.
So, my mistake. I thought it was Shakespeare.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to read off the rest of these, but first, do you have a guess at what is number 1? You have not.
Literally, I mean, based on this, if it's not Bullet and it's not Oliver. Is it like I genuinely have no idea what it could be.
Okay. It is a biopic starring an actress that we have covered on the podcast. This is a big movie for her.
Oh, Funny Girl?
Funny Girl. Number 1.
Interesting.
Number 1.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So we have Funny Girl at number 1. 2001, The Odd Couple, Bullet, Romeo and Juliet, Oliver, Rosemary's Baby at number 7, Planet of the Apes, Yours, Mine, and Ours, a movie I don't know anything about, and The Lion in Winter.
So 2 musical, which tracks for the era that two big budget Hollywood musicals are like in the top grossing films.
Kind of, but like this is the tail end.
That's what I mean. Like we're really we're hitting that sort of wall because I think famously after she makes Funny Girl, she does Hello Dolly, which is basically considered to be the point at which they say this is no longer sustainable. We are burning money making these movies and people aren't going to see them. So
yeah. So we're kind of in like a low point. Like this is the pre-new Hollywood.
Yes, exactly.
Like the dregs of the old way of doing things that are still just like hanging on. So Charly, for reference, this is interesting because, again, like I don't really know how these lists are compiled. It doesn't appear in the top 21 movies, which are listed on the numbers.
Right.
However, the amount that it grossed is actually enough that it should be on that list.
Okay, interesting.
So it should be number 20. It should be number 21 on the list of the top 28 movies.
Right. Okay, interesting.
So it's like it actually did pretty well, all things considered, for this kind of movie. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, fascinating.
As I mentioned,